You could get $500 for a man's life out here, maybe $1,000 if he was famous enough. If he'd really terrorized a territory, that price might go up to $5,000. In the Wild West, hunting human beings wasn't just tolerated, it actually became a legitimate, profitable profession. The Dunn brothers were not upholders of the law, not by a long shot. They were straight-up cattle thieves who cut a dangerous deal with a sheriff who was desperately hiding his own criminal past. Working side by side, they tracked down betrayed and ultimately executed men they had once ridden with and called friends, doing it all just to collect the fat bounty placed on their heads. This is the blood-soaked, harsh truth about what bounty hunting really looked like on the American frontier. Hey, before we truly dive into tonight's story, if you use these episodes to fall asleep, that's what they are here for. Seriously, don't hesitate to hit that like button or subscribe if you haven't yet. And please tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Last time I got comments ranging from Seattle all the way over to Stockholm. That time zone difference is something that will never stop feeling strange to me. So yes, we are journeying back to the heart of the Wild West this evening. But first, let's get truly settled. I mean, actually get cozy. Grab the good pillows, make sure the blanket situation is perfect. Trust me, you'll want to be comfortable for this. Now picture this. Your eyes flutter open inside a rough-hewn cabin somewhere deep in Oklahoma territory. The year is 1893. Your back is throbbing from the thin, lumpy mattress beneath you, and the cheap wool blanket feels scratchy against your skin. Definitely nothing like your soft, comfortable bed right now. Outside, the wind is howling, whistling right through the gaps in the wooden walls. It's still pitch black, but you can feel that dawn is not far off. The air in the cabin carries the distinct scent of wood smoke, strong coffee, and gun oil. That last smell, gun oil, seems to be a permanent fixture in the atmosphere these days. Everyone is carrying a weapon, everyone is dangerous, and absolutely everyone is watching their own back, including you. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed and groan, stretching out your aching muscles. Your worn boots have tracked a light trail of red Oklahoma dust across the wooden floorboards. You realize you slept with your gun belt on again. That's the third night in a row, but that's just what happens when your job is hunting down other human beings for cold, hard cash. You're essentially a professional killer, only you carry a piece of paper that makes it all legal. Yeah. Welcome to the grimy, unsettling world of the Wild West bounty hunter. It's definitely not the romantic adventure the dime novels try to sell you. It's far dirtier, significantly bloodier, and morally murkier than a creek stirred up after a massive cattle drive. Try to visualize this scenario. It's 1892, and the infamous Dalton gang had just met their final, bloody end in Coffeyville, Kansas. 4 bandits were gunned down right in the street after attempting to rob 2 separate banks simultaneously. Talk about biting off more than you can chew. But the Dalton gang wasn't just those 5 guys who showed up that day. They had numerous friends, associates, fellow outlaws, and those guys scattered like buckshot right after the massacre. The few legitimate lawmen were stretched too thin across territories that were larger than some entire European nations. Marshals simply couldn't be everywhere they were needed. So what was the strategy? They started turning to the people who knew the outlaws best, former friends, former riding partners, sometimes even former criminals themselves. That is exactly how the Dunn brothers managed to get into the bounty hunting business in the first place. I spent months researching these guys, and honestly, the line between being an outlaw and being a lawman was practically non-existent, maybe thinner than paper. Sometimes it didn't exist at all. "You want us to bring in the wild bunch?" Bill Dunn probably asked when the marshals offered the deal. The marshals likely replied, "Dead or alive?" The answer was usually, preferably dead. Why? Less paperwork, fewer hassles. That is not an exaggeration. Lawmen literally preferred to have their outlaws dead. Hauling a living, breathing prisoner across hundreds of miles of untamed territory was incredibly dangerous and risked escape or ambush. A dead body just needed a wagon and some ice if the weather happened to be hot. The Dunn brothers were definitely not model citizens themselves. Bill B. Dahl, Calvin, and George Dunn operated a boarding house near Ingalls and also ran a meat market in Pawnee, Oklahoma. However, they ran a lucrative side hustle in cattle rustling. Yep, criminals hunting other criminals. Welcome to the frontier justice system. Their teenage sister, Rose, had even fallen deeply in love with one of the very outlaws they were now hunting, George Bitter Creek Newcomb of the Wild Bunch. You can imagine how complicated that made family dinner conversations. But this whole story really centers on two specific men. First, there's Frank Canton, the tough-as-rawhide lawman who concealed a deeply dark secret. Second, there's B. Dunn, a bounty hunter who wouldn't hesitate to make a deal with the devil himself if there was money involved. Let's back up a moment, though. The American frontier didn't just magically become wild. By the 1890s, the frontier was actually closing rapidly. The government had pushed its way across the continent in relentless waves, claiming land through purchase, annexation, and the ruthless removal of indigenous peoples. Oklahoma Territory was a strange, dangerous patchwork of new settlements, reservations, and wide-open no-man's lands. It was truly the perfect place for outlaws to hide from the law. And hide they did. The Wild Bunch, led by the notorious Bill Doolin, was absolutely terrorizing the region. Train robberies, bank heists, deadly shootouts with lawmen. They were the real deal, highly dangerous and effective. The gang was full of colorful members, often with equally colorful nicknames. There was Bitter Creek Newcomb, Dynamite Dick Clifton, Tulsa Jack Blake, Redbuck Waitman, and Arkansas Tom Jones. These weren't just handles they used for fun. These nicknames were often how people actually identified them. In a world where photographs weren't yet common, your reputation and your nickname traveled much faster than you did. Now, Frank Canton was an enigma entirely unto himself. Serving as both the undersheriff of Pawnee County and a deputy U.S. Marshal, he held immense authority. Yet he wasn't exactly what you'd call morally upstanding. There were constant whispers circulating about his heavy fondness for the bottle and his brutal, often excessive methods. In recent years, he had worked as a cowboy and a sheriff further west, but his early life was kept a complete mystery, or so most people believed. "Frank," his boss might say, "we urgently need the Wild Bunch taken care of." Canton would simply nod, methodically checking his revolver. Dead or alive? The wanted posters offered both options. The Treasury Department really didn't care which way they came in. The bounties placed on these outlaws' heads were serious, life-altering money. We're talking about $1,000 to $3,000 per man, at a time when a solid annual salary might be only $500. That kind of reward is like offering $100,000 per outlaw in today's money. For poor frontier families, that amount of reward was absolutely life-changing. The morning is arriving faster now. You pour yourself a cup of coffee so thick you could almost stand a spoon in it. The cup's warmth is a small relief against the chill in the air. Every bounty hunter out here has their own preferred method. Some track footprints and broken twigs, working much like indigenous scouts. Others rely on working their connections, paying for reliable tips whispered in saloons and brothels. You, however, have your own unique method. You know these outlaws personally. You might have shared a drink with them once, maybe even pulled off a robbery alongside them. Now you're committed to bringing them in, one way or another. Here's the thing about bounty hunting in the Old West. It wasn't anything like the movies depict. Most bounty hunters weren't just random drifters who rode into town looking for wanted posters. They were usually lawmen trying to supplement their low income, or they were locals who knew the criminals on a personal level. The Dunn brothers, for instance, knew exactly where to find certain members of the Wild Bunch because they had partnered with them before. And that is where the real moral darkness of this profession begins to creep in. When you are hunting someone you used to call your friend, that's when it gets ugly. A buzzing fly settles on the wanted poster you've tacked to the cabin wall. The artist's sketch doesn't really look much like Bitter Creek, but the reward amount is clear as day. $3,000, dead or alive. That's 3,000 strong reasons to brutally betray a friend. This system brutally enforced a reality where outlaws couldn't trust anyone at all. The higher your personal bounty went, the more suspiciously your friends started looking at you, calculating, wondering if you were now worth more to them dead than you were alive. "Tell me about the Dunns," people would ask years later. And the old-timers would always lean in close and whisper, they weren't bounty hunters, they were bounty killers. Most people today assume the term bounty hunter was common in the Old West, but it actually wasn't used much back then. These men were often called manhunters, or sometimes just referred to as detectives. The profession was entirely unregulated. Literally anyone could decide to track down a wanted man. The only credential you needed was successfully bringing in the body. By the spring of 1895, the simmering tensions between Frank Canton and the Dunn brothers were escalating quickly. They were supposed to be cooperating to bring down the Wild Bunch, but there was huge money involved, and where there is money, betrayal always follows. B. Dunn had cleverly figured out a way to cut Canton entirely out of the rewards. He and his brothers had a solid lead on where to find Bitter Creek Newcomb and Charlie Pierce. They just needed to successfully get Canton out of the way first. Your coffee is long gone now. You strap on your gun belt, tightening it up a notch. Your rifle is freshly cleaned and fully loaded by the cabin door. Today is definitely the day you're going to find your quarry. Maybe you'll take them alive if they surrender immediately, but honestly, you're not counting on it. You step outside into the soft, pink light of dawn. The air smells sharply of dust and sagebrush. Your horse nickers softly from the small corral, already sensing that a long, hard ride is ahead. This is the life you ultimately chose, or maybe in a strange way it chose you. Either way, you are a bounty hunter now, judge, jury, and if necessary, executioner, all with the full blessing of the territorial law. On the distant horizon, you spot a small, rising dust cloud. Riders are coming closer. Maybe it's the Dunn brothers. Maybe it's a fragment of the Wild Bunch. Either way, you automatically check your gun one more time. In this harsh country, everyone is hunting someone, and sometimes they are hunting you right back. The morning sun breaks fully over the prairie now, casting long, sharp shadows across the dusty ground. You squint against the light, watching those distant riders draw closer and closer. Your hand instinctively rests on your revolver. In the cutthroat world of bounty hunting, hesitation almost certainly means death. Frank Canton was keenly watching his own shadows that spring. He had no idea just how close his dark past was to finally catching up with him, or how much blood would inevitably be spilled before his story finally ended. The true manhunt was about to begin in earnest, and definitely not everyone involved would live to see its conclusion. 2 weeks crawl by. The merciless prairie sun beats down heavily as you ride alongside the Dunn brothers. There are 5 men in total now, with faces weathered by the elements and eyes that are cold and calculating. Their horses kick up thick dust clouds that hang stubbornly in the still Oklahoma air. You threw your lot in with them because they had the essential information. They knew things. Specifically where the Wild Bunch was hiding, who was secretly sheltering them, which saloon girls might whisper secrets after midnight for a price. Bitter Creek's got a real sweet spot for our Rose, Bill Dunn says, breaking the tense silence. Man will risk anything for love, even ride straight into a bullet. The other brothers let out a dry, rattling laugh, but there is zero humor in the sound, just the hollow anticipation of men planning a killing. The oldest brother, Bill Dunn, is the clear leader. B, Doll, Calvin, and George follow his instructions without a single question. They are blood, and out here, that means everything. But they are certainly not hunting for justice. The collected bounties on the wild bunch would set them up comfortably for years if they managed to collect. And that is the constant rub of bounty hunting. It wasn't enough just to find your target. You also had to successfully bring them in, or at least bring back enough of the body to prove definitively that they were dead. Frank Canton is still watching us, Dahl mutters under his breath, checking over his shoulder for the 100th time. Don't trust that badge-wearing son of a... The mere mention of Canton's name makes everyone tense up noticeably. As the undersheriff of Pawnee County, he should theoretically be your strongest ally in this manhunt. But something about the man always sends a cold spike of ice down your veins. Maybe it's just his eyes. They are far too watchful, too knowing, like he's seen the worst of both sides of the law and isn't particularly concerned about either. Here is something else they never tell you in the dime novels. Bounty hunters were rarely lone wolves. They almost always worked in groups because trying to take down a dangerous outlaw alone was essentially suicide. They formed posses, they made quiet deals with local lawmen, and sometimes they even conspired with other outlaws to betray their former friends. The ground beneath your horse's hooves begins to change from prairie grass to harder, packed dirt. You are nearing Ingalls, a nothing little town that has somehow become infamous as a primary hideout for the remnants of the wild bunch. The place has maybe 100 residents, most of whom intentionally turn a blind eye to the presence of outlaws in their midst. Why? Because outlaws spend money freely. They drink expensive whiskey, they buy rounds for everyone in the house, they pay for rooms in cash, and they never haggle with shopkeepers. Town up ahead, Bill Dunn says, methodically adjusting his rifle in its scabbard. We don't all ride in together, too obvious. You nod in agreement, smart. The Dunns might be criminals themselves, but they are absolutely not stupid. I'll go with Calvin, you suggest. We'll take the saloon. You boys check the boarding house. What none of you say out loud is that Rose Dunn might be staying at the boarding house too, their own sister apparently sleeping with the enemy. The girl is barely 17, but she has clearly chosen her side. At least, that's what her brothers currently think. In reality, Rose is about to become the most perfect bait in their deadly trap. Meanwhile, back in Pawnee, Frank Canton sits alone at his desk cleaning his favorite revolver for what must be the 3rd time that day. The man is incredibly methodical and patient. His real backstory would absolutely shock the entire territory if it ever got out, because Frank Canton isn't his real name at all. He was actually born Josiah W. Joe Horner in Virginia back in 1849. As a teenager, he traveled to Texas and became a skilled cowboy, trailing cattle north for Texas cattleman Burke Burnett. But somewhere along that dusty trail, young Joe took a catastrophic wrong turn. From 1871 to 1878, he robbed banks, rustled cattle relentlessly, and killed at least one man, a Buffalo soldier, during a sudden gunfight. In 1877, authorities finally cornered him after he robbed a bank in Comanche, Texas. But Horner wasn't finished yet. He daringly escaped from Texas Ranger custody and fled north into Nebraska, where he successfully shed his outlaw identity like a snake shedding its old skin. Joe Horner essentially died on the trail, and Frank Canton rode into Wyoming a new man. Wait, what? Yes, you heard that correctly. The decorated lawman who was relentlessly hunting down the wild bunch was himself a wanted fugitive living under a fake identity. The irony truly gets even better. Canton eventually rose to become sheriff of Johnson County, Wyoming, before migrating to Oklahoma Territory. A known bank robber turned sheriff turned bounty hunter. You almost have to admire the sheer audacity of the transformation. "You think Newcomb will actually show up?" Calvin Dunn asks as you both tie your horses behind the Ingalls saloon. You check your pocket watch. It's 2:17 in the afternoon and hot as hell. If Rose sent that letter like Bill said, he'll come running. And if he brings Pierce with him, you pat your revolver lightly. More bounty for us. The saloon is exactly like every other frontier watering hole you've ever seen. It's dim, reeking of stale beer, tobacco, and unwashed bodies. A handful of men are leaning against the bar, eyeing you and Calvin suspiciously as you enter the room. The piano player doesn't miss a single note, but his eyes follow your every move too. "Whiskey," you tell the barkeep, sliding a coin across the scarred wooden bar. "Leave the bottle." This is your technique for gathering information. You drink, you quietly listen, and most importantly, you watch everything. Bounty hunting wasn't only about shooting, it was much more about patience. It was about blending into the background until someone got drunk enough or greedy enough to tell you exactly what you needed to know. Calvin strategically takes a small table near the back, facing the saloon door. You lean casually against the bar, positioned so you can clearly see the street through the grimy window. Every man who walks past is subjected to your quick assessment. Height, build, visible weapons, the way they move. You are specifically looking for Bitter Creek's distinctive limp, the painful result of a previous shootout with lawmen last year. The whiskey burns pleasantly going down your throat. 3 hours pass by, slow as molasses. The piano player changes shifts. The crowd thins out, then slowly builds up again as evening approaches. Still no sign of Newcomb or any member of the wild bunch. Then a girl slips quietly through the batwing doors. She is young, very pretty, and moving with a clear sense of purpose. It's Rose Dunn. She doesn't acknowledge you or her brother. She just takes a seat at a small corner table and orders a coffee. "She's here," Calvin mutters to you as you refill his glass. "That means they're coming soon." Outside, the sun finally begins its slow descent, painting the dusty street a deep gold color. Shadows lengthen dramatically. Perfect ambush weather. What is about to happen here is not going to be a fair fight. It's certainly not going to be a classic shootout at high noon with men facing each other down in the middle of the street. That is movie nonsense, pure fiction. Real bounty hunters never announce themselves. They didn't offer their quarry a sporting chance to draw. They waited until their target was completely vulnerable, maybe sleeping, drunk with a woman, or just completely unarmed. Then they struck swiftly, hard, and definitively. Back in his office, Frank Canton reviews the files he has accumulated on the Dunn brothers. They are undeniably unreliable, but they still possess connections to the wild bunch that he critically lacks. He needs them for now, but he absolutely does not trust them. Especially not Bill Dunn, who has been asking far too many pointed questions about Canton's mysterious past. "Marshal," a deputy interrupts his thoughts. "Telegram from Ingalls. The Dunns have been spotted moving in." Canton carefully folds the paper, his expression unreadable. "Saddle my horse." As he straps on his gun belt, Canton considers the situation. The Dunns are clearly planning to ambush members of the wild bunch who might be coming to visit Rose. They intentionally didn't tell Canton when or where, desperately trying to cut him out of the massive reward money. "Amateurs," he mutters to himself, checking his Winchester rifle. They have forgotten the cardinal rule of the frontier. Betrayal works both ways. Night falls completely now. You and Calvin have moved outside, carefully positioning yourselves in the thick shadows directly across from the boarding house. Bill and the other brothers have spread out, covering every possible exit route. Rose left the saloon an hour ago, presumably to wait in her room for Newcomb. Movement, Calvin whispers urgently, nodding toward the edge of town. Two riders are approaching cautiously. Even in the deep darkness, you can clearly make out Bitter Creek Newcomb's lanky frame and Charlie Pierce's distinctive hat. They are both armed but seem completely relaxed, expecting to visit a sweetheart, not to ride directly into a lethal ambush. Your mouth goes suddenly dry. This is the precise moment. These two men are collectively worth $5,000, enough money to buy a decent ranch, enough to start a fresh life somewhere where the Dunns aren't known as cattle thieves. You've never actually killed a man for money before, but there is always a first time for everything. The two outlaws dismount at the hitching post outside the boarding house. They are laughing about something private, completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. Newcomb stretches, wincing noticeably at his old wound, the one Rose's brother gave him in a previous encounter. "Now," Calvin breathes, lifting his rifle slightly. You shake your head firmly. "Let them get inside first. This isn't just about ensuring they don't escape. It's about crafting the narrative you'll tell the authorities afterward. They went for their guns sounds far better than we shot them in the street before they even knew we were there." Even bounty killers feel the need to maintain some kind of moral fiction. But as the two men reach the porch steps, something fundamentally changes. Newcomb suddenly stops, placing a hand on Pierce's arm. They both immediately scan the darkness, suddenly hyper-alert. Years of living as wanted men have instilled a sixth sense for danger. "Something's wrong," Newcomb says, loud enough for you to clearly hear. "It's too quiet here." In that single instant, everything completely unravels. Bill Dunn, impatient as always, steps out abruptly from his hiding place. "Evening, Bitter Creek," he calls out, raising his rifle. What follows is pure chaos. Guns are drawn, shots are immediately fired, and men scatter everywhere. Bitter Creek and Pierce instantly dive for cover, returning fire immediately. A window shatters loudly. Someone screams, probably Rose, realizing her brothers are trying to murder her lover. The air fills rapidly with thick gunpowder smoke and the thunderclap sound of revolvers firing. You squeeze off two quick shots, aiming vaguely for movement in the darkness, unsure if you hit anything at all. Calvin curses loudly as a bullet kicks up dirt right near his feet. This is the messy reality of frontier violence. Not heroic duels, but confused, terrifying exchanges of gunfire where you are just as likely to accidentally hit a friend as you are an enemy. When it's finally over, the resulting silence feels utterly absolute. Your ears are ringing violently from the gunshots. Bitter Creek and Pierce have vanished, having escaped expertly in the confusion. Bill Dunn is cursing a blue streak, nursing a bullet graze on his arm. No one is dead, and there's nothing at all to show for the ambush except wasted ammunition and a completely blown opportunity. They'll be halfway to Indian Territory by sunrise, B. Dunn spits bitterly. Rose warned them somehow. The accusation hangs heavily in the cold air. Their own sister betraying them for an outlaw, but you aren't so certain that's the truth. Something about the timing felt wrong. Newcomb and Pierce were suspicious before anything happened, before they even reached Rose. The ride back to Pawnee is silent and unbearably tense. The Dunns are furious about the failed ambush and, predictably, furious at each other. You wisely keep your thoughts to yourself, just watching and waiting. There is clearly more going on here than a simple bounty hunt. 2 days later, Frank Canton calls you into his office. He looks bone-tired, the lines etched around his eyes deeper than usual. "The Dunns are planning something," he says without any preamble. "Bill been asking direct questions about my time in Wyoming." You simply nod, waiting. Canton rarely reveals anything without a specific purpose. "I need you to stay close to them. Find out exactly what they're planning." "They don't trust me," you point out, referring to the recent failure at Ingalls. Canton's slow smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Make them trust you. Tell them I've been skimming bounty money. Tell them whatever they want to hear. That very night, you find B. Dunn slumped in his usual corner of the saloon. He's already drunk and still intensely angry about the botched ambush. It doesn't take much effort to get him talking. Bill says Canton ain't who he claims to be, B slurs, leaning in close conspiratorially. Says he's actually some old outlaw from Texas, Joe something. Your blood runs instantly cold, but you manage to keep your face completely neutral. That's a serious accusation. B just shrugs off the danger. Bill's got connections up in Wyoming. Says Canton was a hired gun for the big cattle barons during some range war. Killed innocent homesteaders up there. This is clearly bigger than you had initially thought. If the Dunns manage to expose Canton, the entire territorial justice system could be severely compromised. A wanted fugitive successfully posing as a lawman for years. The newspapers would have an absolute field day with that story. What's Bill planning to do with this information? You ask carefully. B's smile is ugly and calculating. Leverage. Canton's been purposely holding out on our bounty money. We aim to get our fair share now. The plot is shockingly simple. Blackmail. The Dunns know Canton's devastating secret and fully intend to use it to extort money from him. But they have severely underestimated the man. Canton didn't survive this long by allowing himself to be cornered. Back at your cabin, you carefully consider your limited options. Should you warn Canton, or just let the Dunns spring their trap? There is clearly money to be made either way, but there are also likely to be bodies dropping. The question now is whose body you want to avoid being among. By May of 1895, the dangerous situation has reached a critical breaking point. The Dunns and Canton have been locked in a silent, tense war of wills, neither side making an obvious direct move. The bounty hunting continues quietly. There are still members of the wild bunch at large, but the atmosphere around Pawnee is poisonous with suspicion. Then, something totally unexpected happens. Bitter Creek Newcomb and Charlie Pierce suddenly reappear near the Dunn family's own home. Rose has clearly maintained contact with her outlaw lover, and he is foolish enough to visit her right under her brother's noses. It's a second, beautiful spring day when Bitter Creek and Pierce ride up to the Dunn house to visit Rose. What they don't know is that her brothers are anxiously waiting inside, watching through the windows, fingers resting on their triggers. As the two outlaws dismount their horses, the Dunn brothers open fire without a single warning. There is no chance to surrender, no pretense of arrest being attempted. Just cold-blooded, calculated killing for the bounty money. Bitter Creek and Pierce fall, instantly riddled with bullets, dead before they even hit the ground. Rose screams loudly, running out to her lover's body, but it's too late. The man she loved is gone, betrayed and murdered by her own family blood. The Dunn brothers stand over the bodies, showing not regret, but cold calculation. $5,000 for Newcomb, another $5,000 for Pierce. That's 10,000 powerful reasons to kill men they once considered friends. When Canton finally arrives hours later, the bodies are already loaded on a wagon bound for Guthrie, where Marshal Nix will pay out the bounty. The undersheriff takes one hard look at the brutal scene and knows exactly what occurred. "You didn't even try to take them alive," he says, his voice flat and hard. Bill Dunn merely shrugs. Poster says dead or alive. They're just as dead as they need to be. What Canton immediately notices, and what you notice too, is something deeply disturbing about the bodies. The bullet wounds are not consistent with men who were shot during an active gunfight. The patterns instead suggest men who were lying down, perhaps sleeping, when the bullets tore into them. Executed, murdered in cold blood. But the territorial authorities are certainly not about to quibble over the specific details of how outlaws met their end. Dead is dead, and the bounty will be paid just the same amount. This is the dark, uncomfortable reality of frontier justice. The line between lawman and outlaw wasn't just thin. Sometimes it didn't exist at all. The same man could easily be both, depending entirely on which side of a wanted poster his face happened to appear. As the wagon pulls away with its grim, human cargo, you catch Canton watching Bill Dunn with an intensely calculating expression. The undersheriff knows the Dunns are planning to expose him, and now they have just proven exactly how casually they are willing to kill. The hunters have unexpectedly become the hunted, and only one side can possibly survive what is coming next. The bodies of Bitter Creek Newcomb and Charlie Pierce lie side by side on crude wooden tables in the undertaker's back room. Flies are already buzzing in the harsh May heat, instantly drawn to the blood-soaked clothing. Marshal Eve Nix circles the corpses slowly, nodding with grim satisfaction. $10,000, he says to the Dunn brothers. $5,000 apiece. That's a fair price for these two. Bill Dunn spits a stream of tobacco juice onto the floor. We earned every single penny of it. You hang back in the deep shadows, watching the transaction unfold. The smell of death and formaldehyde makes your stomach violently turn, but you keep your face carefully neutral. Show any weakness in this company and you instantly become a target yourself. Frank Canton stands deliberately off to the side, his eyes fixed not on the dead bodies, but specifically on the Dunn brothers. There is something deeply calculating in his gaze, like a man mentally tallying debts that are soon going to come due. How'd you manage to get the drop on them? Nix asks, looking closely at the bullet wounds. They came to see our Rose, George Dunn says simply. Weren't expecting trouble from family. The words hang heavy in the air. Betraying family. There is truly nothing lower out here, except maybe betraying close friends. The Dunns have now accomplished both. After the official bounty paperwork is successfully signed, you follow the brothers to the bank. $10,000 is counted out in crisp, fresh bills. That is more money than most frontier folk will ever see in an entire decade. The banker's hands tremble slightly as he counts the stacks. Everyone present knows exactly where this money came from. Blood money. You're cut, Bill Dunn says to you later, sliding $500 across the table back at the saloon, for keeping watch, he claims. It is certainly less than what was originally agreed upon, but you know better than to start an argument. The Dunns aren't in a generous mood, especially with Canton breathing down their necks. Plus, there is the ongoing matter of Rose. The young girl hasn't spoken a single word to her brothers since the horrific killings. Some people say she's left town entirely, unable to live alongside the men who murdered her lover. What about Canton? You ask quietly. He knows. Knows what? B. Dunn's voice instantly takes on a dangerous, hard edge. That Newcomb and Pierce weren't shot in self-defense. Those wounds tell a different story. The Dunn brothers quickly exchange nervous glances. Doesn't matter, Bill finally says, dismissing the concern. Dead is dead. Reward, the same either way. He is absolutely right about the reward, but terribly wrong about what truly matters. In the Wild West, reputation was everything. And word is already spreading quickly about how the Dunn brothers truly operate. Not as legitimate bounty hunters carefully taking dangerous men alive when possible, but as cold-blooded killers who will shoot a man in his sleep if there is cash involved. Back at his office, Canton pulls a thick file from his desk drawer. Inside are old telegrams from Wyoming, letters from Texas, and wanted posters with faces that look eerily familiar. He's been methodically building this file on the Dunn brothers for months. Not for any official investigation, though. This is deeply personal. Canton takes a bottle of whiskey from his drawer and pours a very generous measure. The raw whiskey burns hard, but it visibly steadies his hands. The Dunns know his secret. It is only a matter of time before they try to successfully use it against him. He knows he needs to strike first and hard. But there is a serious complication that emerges. Word has come down from Judge Isaac Parker, the infamous hanging judge of Fort Smith, Arkansas. He wants the remainder of the wild bunch taken care of immediately, and he truly doesn't care much how it happens. The three guardsmen, legendary lawmen Heck Thomas, Bill Tilghman, and Chris Madsen, have been fully authorized to form posses and hunt down the remaining outlaws by any and all means necessary. The Duns, despite their obviously questionable methods, are now part of those officially sanctioned posses. They currently have Heck Thomas's ear, and the old manhunter values quick results far above propriety. If Canton moves against the Duns now, he will suddenly have more powerful enemies than he can possibly handle. So he waits, he watches, and he plans his move meticulously. Summer arrives with brutal, suffocating heat. The massive manhunt for the wild bunch intensifies further. Bill Doolin, the gang's elusive leader, has gone to ground, but rumors place him near Lawson, in what will eventually become Pawnee County. His wife and child are there, and even hardened outlaws get powerfully homesick. You ride with different posses over these months, sometimes with the Duns, sometimes with other respected lawmen. The rewards keep trickling in. They are smaller amounts than the Newcomb and Pierce bounties, but they are steady and reliable. You've now saved nearly $2,000, enough to maybe finally buy that land somewhere remote where people don't know your name or your past deeds. One sweltering afternoon, you unexpectedly find yourself riding alongside Heck Thomas himself. The legendary manhunter is in his 50s now, his face weathered like old saddle leather, his eyes sharp and focused as a hawk's. He's tracked more outlaws successfully than anyone else in the territories combined. You've been riding with the Duns, Thomas states, not phrasing it as a question. Some, you admit cautiously. They know the territory well. Thomas snorts audibly. They know it because they've successfully broken the law across most of it. Bill Dunn was rustling cattle long before he started collecting bounties. People change, you offer weakly, not truly believing it yourself. No, Thomas shakes his head slowly. They don't. They just find new, more complicated ways to be who they've always been. The words stick with you, especially when you think about Frank Canton. Has he actually changed, or has he just found a new, legitimate outlet for his core outlaw instincts? September brings welcome cooler weather and a sudden breakthrough in the hunt for Bill Doolin. The wild bunch leader has been definitively spotted hiding in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Bill Tilghman, the quietest and arguably deadliest of the three guardsmen, volunteers immediately to go after him completely alone. Too many men spook him, Tilghman explains calmly at the planning meeting. I'll bring him in. Dead or alive? Bill Dunn asks, a clearly hungry look in his eyes. Tilghman's gaze is cold and stern. The law prefers them alive, Dunn. Justice is supposed to happen in courtrooms, not in back alleys. The rebuke is clear and sharp. The Dunn's reputation has spread widely, even among hardened lawmen. There are lines you simply don't cross. Killing unarmed men in their sleep, that's murder, not justice, no matter what the wanted poster claims. While Tilghman heads toward Arkansas, tension mounts rapidly back in Pawnee. The Duns, flushed with reward money, have been drinking heavily and loudly bragging about their kills. Bill Dunn, in particular, has been hinting broadly that he knows sensitive things about certain lawmen that could instantly end careers, or worse. Canton avoids the saloons, keeping strictly to himself, but he's watching, always watching. You find yourself dangerously caught between two worlds. The Duns still consider you a reliable part of their posse, but Canton has been asking you to report regularly on their movements. Double-crossing bounty hunters is a deadly game, but then again, so is bounty hunting itself. Duns are planning something, you tell Canton one evening, meeting him behind the livery stable. Bill been talking to that butcher who got arrested for receiving stolen cattle last year, the one the Duns used to sell to. Canton nods slowly. I know, I've been watching him too. Why not just arrest Bill? You've got plenty on him by now. The undersheriff's cold smile returns. It's complicated. The Duns have friends in high places now. Those bounties bought them influence. What Canton pointedly doesn't say, what he doesn't need to say, is that the Duns also have something powerful on him. Knowledge that could destroy everything he has carefully built. January 1896 brings the stunning news. Tilghman has captured Bill Doolin alive in Eureka Springs. It is a national sensation. The leader of the wild bunch, taken without a shot fired, by one man simply walking into a bathhouse and placing a gun against Doolin's head while he was soaking in a tub. That's how it's done, Thomas tells anyone who will listen in the Porney saloon. Clean, professional, Doolin will hang after a proper trial. The Dunn brothers fume openly. There is zero bounty to collect since Tilghman made the arrest as an official federal lawman. $20,000, the highest bounty ever offered in the territory. Gone. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks after his initial capture, Bill Doolin dramatically escapes from the Guthrie jail, along with several other dangerous prisoners, including Dynamite Dick Clifton. The manhunt begins anew with even higher, more desperate stakes. Doolin is now not just an outlaw, but a fugitive who has utterly humiliated the law. Double the reward, Nix announces immediately. $40,000 for Doolin, dead or alive. The territory instantly explodes with renewed activity. Bounty hunters, lawmen, and posses, all searching frantically for the escaped outlaw. The 3 guardsmen coordinate the official manhunt, but dozens of independent operators join the chase, irresistibly drawn by the massive reward. Among them, the Dunn brothers are particularly determined. $40,000 would truly set them up for life. They could leave the territories entirely, head to California, or maybe back east where no one knows their names or their deadly deeds. We'll find him first, Bill Dunn promises, checking his rifles obsessively. We've got sources the lawmen don't. What he really means, though he doesn't dare say it aloud, is that they are willing to use brutal methods the lawmen won't touch. Torture, threats against family members, burning down houses to flush out hiding outlaws. The brutal winter eventually gives way to a cautious spring. Still no reliable sign of Doolin. The intense manhunt continues, but with slightly less urgency as other crimes demand the law's attention. The frontier doesn't pause its violence just because one famous outlaw is at large. Then, in April, B. Dunn receives a vital word from a paid informant. Doolin has been spotted near his wife's family home outside Lawson. He is risking absolutely everything just to visit his wife and young son one last time. We move tonight, Bill Dunn tells his brothers, eyes gleaming. Just us. No lawman to split the massive reward with. You are included in the plan by default. The Dunns need every reliable gun they can trust. And while they don't completely trust you, they believe that money keeps you fiercely loyal. They aren't entirely wrong about that. The ambush is set for the small farmhouse where Doolin's wife is staying. 6 men with loaded rifles surrounding a sleeping house, anxiously waiting for one of the most dangerous men in the territory to walk directly into their trap. Hours crawl by. Midnight comes and goes slowly. Your legs are cramping painfully from crouching low in the underbrush, but you dare not move even slightly. The Dunns are perfectly positioned, patient as spiders waiting for prey. Just before dawn, a lone rider cautiously approaches. He moves with extreme caution, circling the property once before dismounting. Even in the faint pre-dawn light, you immediately recognize Bill Doolin from the wanted posters. He moves with a slight, persistent limp, an old wound that never quite healed right. He ties his horse to a post, quickly checks his guns, then heads directly for the back door of the farmhouse. No one moves from the surrounding shadows. The plan is to take him inside where there is less chance of him escaping in the darkness. 10 minutes pass, then 20. Bill Dunn gives the signal. 3 short whistles, barely audible. You move toward the house with the others, spreading out quickly to cover all potential exits. Through a small window, you see lamplight inside. Doolin is embracing his wife and child. Something tightens horribly in your gut. This doesn't feel like justice at all. It feels like an ambush on a vulnerable family moment. Bill Dunn ruthlessly kicks in the front door. Doolin, hands up. What follows immediately is chaos. Gunshots, screaming, shattering glass everywhere. Doolin fires back from somewhere inside, his bullets splintering the door frame inches from your head. A woman's voice, his wife, is begging everyone frantically to stop. In the confusing darkness, something unexpected happens. Doolin manages to quickly slip out a back window, firing his revolver as he goes. He makes it to his horse, despite taking what looks like a bullet to the shoulder. The Dunns fire wildly after him, but in the chaos and darkness they miss. "Follow him," Bill Dunn roars furiously, already running for his own horse. The chase is officially on. 5 riders pursuing one wounded man across the rough Oklahoma countryside. Doolin is desperate, riding hard despite his injury. He knows what capture means now. Either death on the spot or a humiliating return to jail, followed inevitably by a hangman's noose. Dawn breaks fully as you crest a low hill and spot Doolin's horse, riderless, grazing peacefully by a creek. The outlaw has gone to ground somewhere nearby. "Spread out," Bill orders sharply. "He can't have gone far, not bleeding like that." You fan out through the brush and trees along the creek, every sense heightened, listening hard for movement, watching for disturbed ground or broken branches. This is the most dangerous moment in any manhunt, when the quarry is cornered, wounded, and has absolutely nothing left to lose. A single gunshot cracks the morning silence. Then another one follows instantly. You run toward the sound, heart pounding hard, crashing through the trees. You see B. Dunn on the ground, clutching his leg. Blood seeps heavily between his fingers. 20 yards away, Doolin is desperately reloading his revolver behind a fallen log. Bill Dunn crashes through the underbrush, firing wildly and inaccurately. Doolin returns fire, much more disciplined, making each shot count critically. It's an uneven, short match. 1 wounded man against 4 hunters. The outcome is horrifyingly inevitable. When it's finally over, Bill Doolin lies dead. 5 bullets in his body, none of them from your gun. You held back, watching the fatal encounter rather than participating actively. Bill Dunn stands over the outlaw's corpse, a strange expression fixed on his face. Not triumph, not relief. Something closer to profound disappointment, as if he's lost his very purpose along with his quarry. $40,000, he says quietly. "Finally, get him on a horse. We're taking him to Guthrie." B's wound isn't serious, thankfully. A clean shot through the meaty part of his thigh. He will recover, though he'll have a noticeable limp to match the man who gave it to him. As you help load Doolin's body across his own horse, you realize something fundamental has changed. The hunt is finally over. The wild bunch is effectively finished now. There are still a few scattered members at large, but without Doolin, they are just isolated outlaws, not a terrifying gang. More importantly, the Dunns have now served their purpose as far as the law is concerned. The highly dangerous criminals are dead or captured. The territories are safer. But men like the Dunns don't just quietly fade away when they're no longer useful. They inevitably find new targets, new sources of income. And Frank Canton is watching them, waiting for his moment to strike back. Back in Guthrie, Marshal Nix personally counts out the reward money, $40, 000 in stacks of crisp, fresh bills. The Dunns divide it 5 ways, $8,000 each. Your share is now more than enough to finally buy that land you've been dreaming of, enough to start fresh somewhere far from Oklahoma territory. But something holds you back from riding out immediately. The story is clearly not over yet. There is a reckoning coming between Canton and the Dunns. And somehow you know you'll be caught right in the middle when it happens. "We're heading to California," Bill Dunn tells you as you leave the marshal's office. "Once B's leg heals up, nothing left for us here." You nod noncommittally. "Good luck." "You should come along," he adds, which surprises you. "We work well together. Could be opportunities out west." Before you can answer, you spot Frank Canton across the street watching you intently. The undersheriff tips his hat slightly, a gesture that seems almost mocking. Bill Dunn follows your gaze and his expression instantly hardens. "That badge-wearing son of a," he mutters under his breath. "Think I don't know what he's planning? He's been building a case against us for months." "For what?" you ask, though you already know the answer. "For Newcomb and Pierce. Says we executed them." Dunn spits. "Like it matters how outlaws die." "It matters to Canton," you point out, "and soon it will matter to everyone in Pawnee County." As summer approaches, the Dunns remain stubbornly in Oklahoma despite their grand talk of California. B's leg is healing slowly, and Bill has critically unfinished business with Frank Canton. The intense tension between the two men has become an open secret in Pawnee. Two dangerous predators circling each other, waiting patiently for a sign of weakness. "Watch yourself," Heck Thomas warns you one hot afternoon. When those two finally clash, anyone nearby is liable to get caught in the crossfire. You nod, appreciating the concern from the legendary manhunter. "I've been thinking of moving on myself." Thomas studies you carefully for a moment. "You've got the makings of a good lawman, you know, not like the Dunns. They're just killers with temporary permission." The words resonate deeply as you ride back to your cabin. Maybe there is another, better path available. Perhaps the blood money currently sitting in your pocket doesn't have to ultimately define your future. But first, you need to survive what is inevitably coming. Because Frank Canton isn't just quietly building a case against the Dunns anymore. He is actively planning to eliminate them completely. And the Dunns know it is coming. The storm clouds are gathering fast over Pawnee County. And when the lightning finally strikes, it will change the territory forever. Summer in Oklahoma territory brings a sweltering heat that seems to ignite tempers as readily as it dries out the prairie grass. You've started sleeping outside your cabin most nights, the interior too stifling even with the windows wide open. The Doolin bounty money remains carefully hidden beneath a loose floorboard inside, still mostly untouched. Every time you seriously think about spending it, something holds you back instinctively. It's not quite guilt, exactly. It's more like a deep-seated caution. Money earned from death has a dangerous way of bringing more death along with it. The Dunns haven't departed for California as planned. B's leg is slowly healing, but there's a much bigger reason for their delayed departure. Bill Dunn has been holding meetings with territorial politicians in Guthrie, leveraging his newfound wealth to quickly buy influence. The bounty hunter who helped eliminate the Wild Bunch now finds that powerful doors are open to him that were previously shut tight. Frank Canton knows all of this. He watches from the shadows, gathering intelligence, building his case piece by agonizing piece. The undersheriff rarely seems to sleep these days, driven by something far beyond mere duty. The feud between him and the Dunns has become intensely personal, though few people fully understand how deep the history runs. "Canton's digging into our past," Bill Dunn tells you one evening at the saloon. He's invited you to drink with him and his brothers, a calculated, public show of trust. Got people asking questions back in Texas about cattle we sold years ago. You sip your whiskey slowly. Statute of limitations must be up on that by now. Ain't about the law, B. Dunn interjects, his injured leg propped up on a chair. The wound is still seeping enough to visibly stain his bandages. It's about reputation. A man gets known as a cattle thief. Certain doors close to him permanently. The painful irony of their concern is not lost on you. The Dunns are worried about being labeled thieves while they proudly wear the mantle of killers. What's Canton's real game, you ask, fishing for information you can relay back to the undersheriff later. This double role has become dangerously comfortable to you. Bill leans forward conspiratorially, lowering his voice further. We know things about him, things that would end more than just his career. And he knows we know. Dahl and George Dunn exchange brief, silent glances but say nothing. Calvin stares blankly into his glass, appearing distracted. The brothers are clearly not as unified as they once were. The sudden influx of money has created new tensions among them. Dahl wants to leave immediately for California. George has been openly talking about buying a ranch up in Wyoming. Only Bill and B seem absolutely determined to stay in Pawnee and confront Canton. What about you? Bill asks suddenly, fixing his gaze on you. You sticking around or moving on soon? You shrug dismissively, remaining noncommittal. Haven't decided yet. Well, decide soon, B says with surprising heat. The way things are currently heading, folks are going to have to clearly pick sides. Can't sit on the fence forever. The next morning, you relay the entire conversation to Canton at the livery stable where his horse is being shod. The undersheriff listens impassively, his face revealing nothing at all. They're right about one thing, he says finally. People will have to choose sides. And what side am I on exactly? You ask, irritated by his cryptic manner. Canton studies you closely for a long moment. That depends entirely. Do you believe there is a fundamental difference between hunting outlaws and murdering them in their sleep? Before you can answer that deep question, the blacksmith approaches with Canton's horse. The animal's hooves clop loudly on the packed earth, the fresh shoes gleaming brightly in the morning sun. Good work, Canton tells the smith, paying him extra. Horse needs to be ready for hard riding. Might be leaving town soon. The comment instantly catches your attention. Going somewhere. Just being prepared. Canton's smile doesn't reach his eyes at all. Storm's coming. That evening, news spreads like wildfire through Pawnee that changes absolutely everything. B. Dunn has received an official commission as a special deputy U.S. Marshal. The appointment came directly from Marshal Nix's office, bypassing all normal channels. Bill Dunn's political connections have paid off in spectacular, unexpected fashion. A deputy marshal, Canton says when you bring him the news. He is sitting at his desk, cleaning his revolver with methodical precision. That's a clever move on their part. Now, if I move against him, I'm attacking a federal officer. You still planning to move against him? Canton reassembles his gun with practiced ease, checking the action twice before holstering it slowly. He murdered those men, Newcomb and Pierce, shot them while they were sleeping, then claimed self-defense. That's not law, that's not even bounty hunting, that's just killing for money. The reward posters said dead or alive, you point out again. There's a difference between killing a man who's shooting at you and executing him in his bed. Canton's voice is cold and unyielding. The Dunns cross that line. They'll cross others if they're not stopped permanently. You can't argue with his logic, but something still doesn't quite add up. Canton's relentless crusade against the Dunns feels too personal, too intensely driven. There is clearly more to this story than he is willing to tell. What is your real history with the Dunns? You ask him directly. Canton's eyes narrow sharply. What do you mean by that? This isn't just about Newcomb and Pierce. There's something else. something specific between you and Bill Dunn. For a moment, you fully expect Canton to deny it outright or simply deflect the question. Instead, he sighs heavily, suddenly looking much older than his years. Bill Dunn has been asking questions in Wyoming about my time there during the Johnson County War. The Johnson County War. Even out in the territories, people had heard of the bloody, brutal conflict between wealthy cattlemen and small ranchers in Wyoming. Hired guns, mass killings, the U.S. cavalry called in desperately to restore order. You were a sheriff there, you say, recalling bits of Canton's vague background. I was, he admits. He stares out the window, his eyes focusing on something distant in the past. I also worked for the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. They hired protection during the Troubles. Protection, a polite euphemism for mercenaries, hired guns. The missing pieces of the puzzle start sliding into place. The Dunns found out you did something during that war, something that could absolutely ruin you. Canton turns back to you, his face a hard mask. Let's just say I was on the wrong side of history for a time, and Bill Dunn is precisely the type of man to use that kind of powerful information. The next few days pass in tense anticipation. B. Dunn proudly wears his new deputy marshal badge around town, making sure Canton sees it constantly. The brothers frequent the saloons, buying drinks for anyone who will stand with them, actively building their own coalition of support. Canton works quietly, methodically, behind the scenes. He manages to revive the old cattle rustling charges against B. Dunn, finding new witnesses, building a legal case that even Dunn's new badge cannot deflect. It is a deadly chess match between two ruthless men, each moving their pieces into the perfect position for the final confrontation. You keep your own head down, playing both sides carefully, passing selective information to each camp. It's a truly dangerous game, but it keeps you valuable to both parties, and that means staying alive. On a sweltering afternoon in early August, you're in the general store when Doll Dunn bursts suddenly through the door. Canton, done it, he announces frantically to his brothers, who are pricing new rifles. Got the butcher to testify against B about the stolen cattle. Judge issued a warrant this morning. Bill Dunn's face darkens instantly with fury. He wouldn't dare arrest a deputy marshal. Warrant's already with the sheriff, Doll insists, out of breath. They'll be coming for B any time now. The store falls completely silent. Even the shopkeeper stops pretending to rearrange merchandise, frozen in place by the unbearable tension. Let them come, B says defiantly, touching the badge on his chest. I'm a federal officer now. Canton's just a county undersheriff. He tries to arrest me, he'll regret it deeply. The brothers quickly leave, but not before Bill Dunn fixes you with a deep, suspicious stare. You coming? You make a show of checking the meager supplies you've been gathering. Got to finish here. I'll catch up later. Once they're gone, you slip out the back alley and head straight for Canton's office. The undersheriff is already strapping on his gun belt when you enter. The Dunns know about the warrant, you tell him without preamble. Canton nods, completely unsurprised. I figured they would. Too many loose lips in the courthouse. B says he'll resist arrest. Says his marshal's badge trumps your authority. He's wrong. Canton checks his revolver one final time. A deputy marshal commission doesn't erase past crimes, especially not when those crimes were committed right here in my jurisdiction. You follow Canton out to the street, uncertain of your role in what is about to unfold. The undersheriff seems to sense your deep hesitation. You don't have to be part of this, he says, his voice surprisingly gentle. You've already done your part bringing information. What happens next is strictly between me and the Dunns. Before you can respond, a shout comes from down the street. B. Dunn is standing prominently in front of the saloon, his brothers flanking him closely. His deputy marshal's badge gleams brightly in the afternoon sun, as does the large revolver strapped to his hip. "Canton," he calls out, his voice carrying clearly across the dusty street. "Heard you've been looking for me." People instantly scatter, diving into doorways and between buildings. Everyone in Pawnee knows exactly what is coming. They've seen it building for weeks. Canton walks forward with slow, measured steps. You hang back cautiously, your hand hovering near your own gun, unsure which side you'll support if bullets start flying. "I have a warrant for your arrest, done," Canton says calmly when he's 20 paces away, cattle rustling, Judge Parker's court. "I'm a Deputy United States Marshal," B responds, his thumbs hooked confidently in his belt near his holster. "You've got no authority over me. That badge doesn't wash away your crimes. Come peacefully and you'll receive a fair trial." Bill Dunn steps forward, positioning himself slightly behind his brother. "We all know there's nothing fair about this, Canton. This is personal now." "The law isn't personal," Canton replies stiffly, but there is something in his tone that betrays him. "This is personal, deeply so." "The law," Bill laughs harshly. "That's rich coming from you, Joe." The name falls like a sudden thunderclap in the silent street. Joe Horner. You've never heard it before, but Canton's immediate reaction tells you everything you need to know. The undersheriff goes rigid, his face draining completely of color. "That's right," Bill continues, instantly sensing his great advantage. "We know who you really are. The Texas bank robber who escaped jail and made himself a new identity. The outlaw who became a lawman." Canton doesn't deny it. His silence is confirmation enough. "You arrest my brother," Bill says, his voice ringing with power, "and everyone in the territory will know Frank Canton doesn't exist, that the great lawman is just a fugitive playing dress up." For a long, tense moment, absolutely no one moves. The tension stretches thin, like a bowstring pulled too tight. Then Canton does something entirely unexpected. He smiles slowly. "You think that matters now after all this time?" His voice is calm, almost amused. "I've spent 20 years successfully on this side of the law, caught more outlaws than you've had hot meals. My record speaks for itself." "Your record," B snarls back. "You're a wanted man, Canton, or should I call you Horner? Once folks know the truth, you'll be the one in chains." Canton's smile fades completely. "Maybe, but first you're coming with me, badge or no badge." Everything happens in a terrifying instant. B's hand drops swiftly to his gun. Canton moves with the lethal speed of a striking snake. His revolver clears leather before B's fingers even close around his grip. A single shot cracks loudly in the still air. B. Dunn staggers backward, a look of profound shock freezing on his face. A dark stain immediately spreads across his shirt, directly over his heart. He falls without uttering a word, dead before he hits the dirt. Bill Dunn roars instantly with rage, reaching for his own weapon, but Dahl grabs his arm firmly, holding him back. "Not here," Dahl hisses frantically. "Not like this, he'll kill you too." The street is frozen in a morbid tableau. Canton stands there, his smoking gun still raised. B. Dunn is sprawled tragically in the dirt, blood pooling beneath him. The remaining brothers are paralyzed, caught between raw grief and burning fury. "Anyone else want to resist arrest?" Canton asks quietly, his eyes fixed firmly on Bill Dunn. The standoff stretches for 10 heart-pounding beats, 20. Then Bill slowly raises his hand, stepping away from his dead brother. "This isn't over, Canton," he says, his voice raw with emotion. "Not by a long shot." "It never is," Canton replies simply, holstering his weapon with a definitive click. "Get your brother's body to the undertaker, then get out of my town, all of you." The Dunns retreat, carrying B's lifeless form between them. The crowd that had hidden during the confrontation now cautiously emerges, murmuring in shocked tones. Deputy Marshal B. Dunn, shot dead in the street by Undersheriff Frank Canton. It's the stuff of dime novel legends, already growing wildly in the telling as people spread the news. You approach Canton, who stands alone in the street staring after the Duns retreat. "Joe Horner," you ask quietly. Canton doesn't look at you. "A ghost from another life, a man who died a long time ago. Bill Dunn will spread the story, your secret's out now." "Let him." Canton finally turns to you. "Some secrets lose their power once they're told, and some men can't be destroyed by their past." As the sun sets over Porney, casting long, dark shadows across the street where B. Dunn died, you realize this story is far from concluded. Bill Dunn isn't the type to simply accept defeat or the death of his brother. He'll be back, surely with a plan for revenge that will shake the territory to its very core. And Frank Canton, or Joe Horner, will be patiently waiting for him. A lawman with an outlaw's instincts. A man who understands exactly how dangerous his enemy is. Because in the Wild West, a badge didn't automatically make you a lawman any more than a wanted poster made you an outlaw. What truly mattered was which side of the gun you were standing on when the shooting started, and who was ultimately left standing when the smoke completely cleared. That night, you lie awake on your bedroll outside the cabin, staring up at stars that seem impossibly distant from the blood and dust of human concerns. The territory feels inherently different now, charged with anticipation. Word of B. Dunn's death will spread like wildfire across the land. The remaining brothers will undoubtedly regroup, planning their next move carefully. Canton will prepare vigilantly for their inevitable return. And you are still dangerously caught between worlds, between competing loyalties. The bounty money still sits securely beneath your floorboard. Blood money that seems to whisper your name seductively in the darkness. Maybe it is finally time to take it and ride out completely. Head west toward California or north to the gold fields. Leave the Dunns and Canton to settle their private war without your involvement. But something inside tells you it's already too late for that kind of escape. You are fundamentally part of this story now, whether you want to be or not. And in the Wild West, stories like these only ever seem to end one specific way, with more blood in the dust. Dawn creeps slowly over Porney, bringing a somber, muted light. The town feels utterly different after yesterday's violent killing. People move faster, they speak quieter, and they constantly cast nervous glances toward the undertakers where B. Dunn's body awaits burial. No one dares to linger in the street where he fell. You saddle your horse early, planning to ride the perimeter of town, checking whether the remaining Dunn brothers have left, as Canton commanded, or if they are regrouping dangerously nearby. The weight of your revolver against your hip is somehow more noticeable today, after seeing how terrifyingly fast Canton drew his weapon. You've been practicing your own quick draw in private, painfully aware of the massive gap between your skills and his. Heading out, the voice instantly startles you. Canton stands in the deep shadow of the livery stable, looking like he hasn't slept at all. His eyes are bloodshot but sharply alert. "Just scouting," you answer, tightening your cinch, seeing if the Dunns cleared out completely. Canton nods slowly. "They won't go far, not with B in the ground now." "You really think they'll come back after what happened to B?" The undersheriff's laugh is completely without humor. "You do know Bill Dunn very well if you're asking that question." He is right, of course. Men like Bill Dunn don't just walk away from a brother's killing, badge or no badge. Revenge isn't just likely, it is absolutely inevitable. "What about your situation?" you ask carefully. "The whole Joe Horner thing." Canton's face hardened slightly. "Already sent telegrams to the governor and Marshal Nix explaining the full situation. Got ahead of Bill Dunn's version. And we'll see." He shrugs with forced casualness. 20 years of solid lawman work against an old Texas warrant. Might be enough, might not be too. That's the unspoken part of the equation. Even in 1896, bureaucracy moves painfully slow. By the time officials decide whether Frank Canton keeps his badge or gets shipped back to Texas in chains, Bill Dunn could have already put him in the ground right beside his brother. "Watch yourself out there," Canton says as you mount up. "The Dunns have friends." The morning air is cool as you ride out of town, a brief respite before the day's heat sets in. Your horse's hooves kick up small dust clouds that hang lightly in the still air. The land immediately around Porney is mostly flat, with scattered stands of trees marking the creek beds. Perfect ambush country, you realize. You ride carefully, constantly scanning the horizon, noting the nervous movement of birds that might signal humans disturbing their usual patterns. 2 hours out, you spot exactly what you're looking for. Smoke from a small campfire, carefully hidden in a grove of cottonwoods along a creek. Approaching cautiously, you leave your horse tied 100 yards away and proceed the rest of the distance on foot. Angry, determined voices drift through the trees, not waiting for some circuit judge. Bill Dunn's distinctive growl carries clearly on the air. "Canton shot B down like a dog, badge don't give him that right. He'll claim self-defense," another voice sounding like Dahl responds. "B went for his gun first." "Because Canton pushed him to it," Bill snaps back. "Backed him into a corner. You edge closer, staying low in the thick underbrush." Through gaps in the foliage, you can make out 3 men, Bill, Dahl, and George Dunn, huddled intensely around a small fire. Calvin is nowhere to be seen. "We do this smart," Bill continues, his voice calmer now. "Not a straight-up fight in the street. Canton's too fast for that. We need an edge." "What kind of edge?" George asks impatiently. Bill stirs the fire with a stick, his face grim in the flickering light. "The kind that comes from knowing a man's schedule, his habits, when he'll be vulnerable. He doesn't drink much," Dahl points out. "Doesn't visit whorehouses. Man's careful." "Everyone got weak spots," Bill insists stubbornly. "Even the great Frank Canton. You've heard enough information now." Slowly, carefully, you back away from the camp. Once clear of the trees, you hurry back to your horse and ride hard for Porney. Canton urgently needs to know the Dunns are planning an ambush. But halfway back, you suddenly pull up hard, reining in your horse, feeling profoundly uncertain. Who are you really working for in this fight? Canton, been straight with you mostly, but he's living a lie as big as Texas itself. The Dunns are killers, but their grievance is undeniably real. Canton did provoke B into drawing, giving himself the perfect legal excuse to shoot. There is no clean side here, only men with guns and grudges, all waist-deep in blood. You sit your horse atop a small rise overlooking the town, caught agonizingly between loyalties. The smart play would be to grab your bounty money right now and ride out. Let Canton and the Dunns settle their deadly feud without you in the middle. But running feels wrong somehow, like leaving a story half-finished. By the time you ride back into Porney, it's mid-afternoon. The town is buzzing with shocking news. Frank Canton has been officially suspended, pending an investigation into his true identity. The telegram came directly from the territorial governor himself. Canton has been ordered to immediately surrender his badge and guns until authorities can sort out whether he is a legitimate lawman or an escaped Texas fugitive. You find him at his house on the edge of town, a small, neat cabin with a front porch where he sits calmly cleaning his rifle. His badge is conspicuously absent from his chest. "They suspended you," you say, dismounting. News travels fast. He doesn't look up from his work, his hands moving with practiced efficiency over the weapon's parts. You turning in your guns. Now he does look up, a faint flicker of amusement crossing his face. "What do you think?" "I think the Dunns are camped at Cottonwood Creek," you say firmly, making your choice. "Planning how to kill you. Bill wants to catch you somewhere isolated, avoid a straight-up fight." Canton nods, completely unsurprised. "Smart. He knows I'd drop him like I did B if we faced off. So what's your plan now?" "My plan is to end this today." He slides the last piece of the rifle back into place, the metallic click unnervingly final in the quiet afternoon. How you're suspended. If you kill Bill Dunn now, it'll look like murder. It'll be self-defense, Canton states plainly. Bill, coming for me either way. I'm just choosing the battlefield. As the sun begins its inevitable descent toward the western horizon, Porney grows eerily quiet. Word has spread about Canton's suspension and the Dunn's dangerous proximity. Folks are battening down, preparing for the violent storm everyone can feel brewing. You find yourself in the saloon, nursing a whiskey, listening intently to the town gossip. The story of Canton and the Dunns has grown wildly with each telling. Some say Canton was a famous Texas outlaw who killed 20 men before becoming a lawman. Others claim the Dunns have recruited a dozen gunmen to help them exact their revenge. The truth, as usual, is both less and more dramatic than the circulating tales. You rode with them both, a weathered cowboy says, sliding onto the bar stool beside you. The Dunns and Canton, what's your read on how this ends? You consider your whiskey, buying time to formulate an answer. Bloody, you finally answer honestly. It ends bloody. He nods sagely. Always does with men like that. Too much pride, too much history, too many guns, you add sadly. The batwing doors swing open suddenly, and all conversation instantly halts as Bill Dunn steps into the saloon. He is completely alone, dusty from the trail, his face haggard with grief and burning rage. His eyes scan the room intently before settling directly on you. There he is, he says loudly enough for everyone present to hear. Canton's little spy. The cowboy beside you vacates his stool with remarkable speed. Others edge quickly toward the doors and windows. No one wants to be caught in what is obviously coming next. I'm just having a drink, Bill, you say, keeping your voice level and calm. Not looking for trouble. Bit late for that, he approaches, stopping just out of arm's reach. Saw your tracks out by our camp, following us. Were you running back to Canton with reports? There's absolutely no point in denying it now. He deserved to know you were planning to bushwhack him. Bill's laugh is sharp and bitter. And what did he tell you about himself? About Joe Horner, the bank-robbing, jail-breaking outlaw who reinvented himself as a lawman. Did he mention that part? He didn't deny it. No, he wouldn't. Canton's not stupid. Bill signals the barkeep for a whiskey. The man delivers it with shaking hands, then retreats quickly. You know what the funny part is? I don't even care that he used to be an outlaw. Hell, half the lawmen out here started on the wrong side of a wanted poster. Then what do you care about? Bill knocks back his whiskey in one swallow, grimacing at the burn. He killed my brother, shot him down in the street like a dog. His voice cracks slightly with emotion. B was hot-headed, sure, but he didn't deserve to die over some ancient cattle-rustling charge. For a brief moment, Bill Dunn isn't the notorious bounty hunter or the known cattle thief. He's just a man grieving his brother, wounded and profoundly dangerous in his pain. What are you planning, Bill? You ask, though you already know the answer. What do you think? I'm going to kill Frank Canton. He says it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. Only question is whether you're going to try to stop me. Your hand rests near your revolver. Bill notices his own hand hovering near his weapon. The saloon has emptied completely around you. Even the barkeep is ducking behind his bar. It's just you and Bill Dunn, one wrong word away from guns being drawn. I'm not dying for Frank Canton, you say carefully, choosing your words. But I'm not helping you kill him either. Bill studies you intensely, weighing your words, measuring your resolve. Finally, he nods slightly. Fair enough. Stay out of the way, then. This ends today, one way or another. He backs slowly toward the door, never taking his eyes off you. At the threshold, he pauses. B wasn't a bad man, you know. None of us are what the stories make us out to be, not even Canton. Then he is gone, his boots crunching loudly on the boardwalk outside, heading toward Canton's cabin on the edge of town. You release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The barkeep emerges from hiding, his face pale and frightened. "You best warn Canton," he whispers, wiping nervous sweat from his forehead. "Dunn's got that killing look in his eye." But you hesitate. Maybe this really isn't your fight. Maybe the smart play is still to grab your money and ride out. The sun hangs low now, painting porny in dramatic shades of red and gold, the perfect light for a final showdown. At Canton's cabin, preparations are already well underway. The undersheriff sits calmly on his porch, his revolver resting on his lap, his rifle leaning against the wall beside him. He's positioned himself with clear sightlines to all approaches, making it impossible to sneak up on him. "Bill Dunn's on his way," you announce, reining in your horse. "Just left the saloon, he's coming to kill you." Canton nods, completely unsurprised. "Figured it would be today. Sun's almost down, last chance before full dark." "You could leave," you suggest one last time. "Ride out, come back when things cool down." "And go where?" Canton's smile is thin and weary. "I've spent 20 years building this life. I'm not running from Bill Dunn or anyone else." You dismount, unsure why you're staying. This isn't your battle, but something intangible keeps you here. Curiosity, perhaps, or some misplaced sense of loyalty, or just the strong desire to see exactly how this story finally ends. "You don't have to stay," Canton says, reading your thoughts easily. "This is between me and Dunn." "I know," you reply, "but I'm staying anyway." He accepts this with a simple nod, then returns his attention to watching the road. The minutes stretch out like hours as the sun continues its descent. Shadows lengthen dramatically across the dusty ground. Somewhere, a nighthawk calls, its voice sounding lonely in the gathering dusk. "Tell me something," you say, breaking the prolonged silence. "Did you really kill innocent homesteaders during the Johnson County War, like Dunn claimed?" Canton's face hardened slightly. "The Johnson County War wasn't about innocents on one side and villains on the other. It was complicated, messy." "That's not an answer." "No, it is." He sighs heavily. "I did things in Wyoming I'm not proud of. Things I justified to myself at the time because I was on the payroll of powerful men. But I never shot an unarmed man in the back. Never killed except when my own life was directly threatened. Whether that is the complete truth, you'll likely never know for certain. But it's the closest thing to a confession you are ever likely to get from Frank Canton." "Rider coming," Canton says suddenly, straightening in his chair. "Looks like Bill's decided to face me straight up after all." You peer down the road. Sure enough, a lone horseman approaches at a walk, silhouetted powerfully against the setting sun, the distinctive shape of Bill Dunn coming to avenge his brother's death. "Last chance to leave," Canton tells you one final time. "I'll stay out of it," you promise. "But I'm watching." Canton stands, checking his revolver one final time before holstering it. He steps off the porch and into the yard, waiting patiently as Bill Dunn draws closer. It's a strange, almost ceremonial moment. Two powerful enemies approaching each other in the dying light, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the frontier. No law exists here but what they make themselves. No justice but what they deal with their own hands. Bill reins in his horse 30 yards from the cabin, dismounting slowly. His rifle remains in its saddle scabbard, a clear statement of intent. This will be settled with revolvers, man to man. "Canton," he calls out, his voice carrying clearly in the still evening air. "Got something to settle between us." "I know why you're here, Dunn," Canton responds, standing his ground firmly. "But it won't bring your brother back." "No, it won't," Bill advances slowly, his hand hovering near his holstered weapon. "But it'll balance the scales." They face each other across 20 yards of dust and scraggly grass. You watch from the edge of the porch, your heart pounding heavily. This is how legends are truly born in the West. 2 men, 2 guns, 1 survivor. "You know my reputation," Canton says evenly. "You've seen what happened to be walk away, Dunn. Live to fight another day." "Can't do that," Bill replies, his voice resolute. "You know that, Frank," Canton nods slowly, resigned. "Then let's do this properly. No more words, draw when you're ready." Time seems to dramatically slow down. Birds fall silent. The whole world seems to hold its breath, waiting. Both men stand poised, muscles tense, eyes locked fiercely on each other. Bill moves first, his hand dropping to his revolver with impressive, practiced speed. But Canton is faster, unnaturally fast. His gun clears leather and fires while Bill's is still rising. The crack of the shot echoes across the landscape. Bill staggers instantly, a look of utter surprise crossing his face. A dark stain immediately spreads across his shirt, almost the identical spot where B was hit. He manages to fire his own weapon, but the bullet goes wildly wide, kicking up dust harmlessly at Canton's feet. "Damn," Bill whispers, dropping heavily to his knees. "You really are that fast." His revolver falls from nerveless fingers. He pitches forward onto the dirt, blood pooling beneath him. Canton approaches cautiously, his gun still trained on the fallen man, but it's unnecessary. Bill Dunn is dead, his eyes staring sightlessly at the darkening sky. For a long, quiet moment, Canton stands over his fallen enemy, his face unreadable. Then he holsters his weapon and turns to face you. "It's done," he says simply. But is it truly done? Two Dunn brothers remain, Dahl and George. Will they continue the vendetta or take this brutal lesson as a warning and finally leave the territory? That night, as word of Bill Dunn's death spreads rapidly through Pawnee, you sit with Canton on his porch, a bottle of whiskey shared between you, the stars emerging one by one overhead. "What happens now?" you ask, referring to his suspension and the Joe Horner business. Canton takes a thoughtful sip of whiskey. "Already got a telegram from Marshal Nix. He's arguing my case vigorously with the governor. 20 years of service against ancient charges. Odds are now in my favor." "And if they're not," he shrugs dismissively, "then maybe Joe Horner dies again. Maybe Frank Canton becomes someone new. The West is still vast enough," he suggests, "to reinvent yourself if you need to. You consider this, the strange, necessary fluidity of identity out here on the frontier. How a man can shed his old skin like a snake, emerging as something entirely new. How the line between outlaw and lawman is often as thin as the paper of a wanted poster. Dahl and George left town," you tell him, changing the subject slightly. "Saw them riding out just after sundown, heading west. Look like they're smarter than their brothers," Canton observes. "Know when to fold a losing hand." But even as he says it, you both know this might not truly be over. Vendettas have a dangerous way of persisting in the West, passed down like twisted inheritances. The surviving Dunns might simply be biding their time, patiently waiting for Canton to lower his guard. "Get some sleep," Canton says finally, rising from his chair. "Tomorrow soon enough to decide what comes next." As you walk back to your cabin through the quiet, uneasy streets of Pawnee, you feel the crushing weight of choices pressing down on you. Stay or go. Keep the blood money or leave it behind forever. Continue this life of hunting humans or find something completely new. The bounty from Doolin's death would buy a decent ranch somewhere, or maybe passage to Alaska where the gold rushes are drawing thousands of desperate souls, or maybe something else entirely. A normal life, if such a thing even exists for someone who's done what you've done. In your cabin, you pry up the loose floorboard and stare down at the stacks of bills hidden beneath. Blood money, death money, but money all the same. Across town, Frank Canton sits alone on his porch, watching the road vigilantly for ghosts that might yet appear. Joe Horner's past and Frank Canton's present, eternally twined together like a hangman's rope. And somewhere in the vast darkness beyond Pawnee, Dahl and George Dunn ride west, carrying haunting memories of dead brothers and careful plans for vengeance that may or may not ever come to fruition. The Wild West is rapidly changing. The frontier is closing fast. The days of infamous outlaws and ruthless bounty hunters are numbered. But for now, in this dangerous moment, the old ways still fiercely hold sway. Men still die for honor, for money, for vengeance, and the line between hunter and hunted remains as blurred and indistinct as ever. The morning after Bill Dunn's death dawns with an unexpected rain. Fat, cold droplets fall from a pewter sky, quickly turning Porney's dirt streets to thick mud, washing away the blood outside Canton's cabin. You stand on your porch, watching townsfolk hurry quickly between buildings, heads bowed against the weather, whispering nervously about yesterday's shooting. 2 Dunn brothers dead in less than a week, both killed by Frank Canton's hand. The undertaker is doing remarkably good business these days. You've made your decision during the long, sleepless night. The bounty money stays hidden beneath the floorboards of your cabin, a strange gift to whoever finds it years from now. You are riding out today, rain or no rain. This chapter of your life is finally finished. A rider approaches through the rain, hunched down in a slicker that can't quite keep out the downpour. It's Marshal Everett Nix himself, come all the way from Guthrie. His face is grim as he dismounts outside the sheriff's office. Whatever news he brings, it definitely isn't good. Curious, you follow him at a distance. Inside, you find Canton already seated across from Nix's temporary desk. The marshal hasn't bothered to remove his wet coat, suggesting this meeting won't last long. Frank. Nix nods in greeting as you enter the room. Or should I call you Joe? Canton's face remains impassive. Frank will do. You've put me in one hell of a spot, Nix continues, rubbing his temples. 2 Dunns dead, both shot by you, one wearing a deputy marshal's badge. B drew first, Canton says flatly, and Bill came hunting me. Both were clean kills. I don't doubt it, Nix sighs deeply, pulling off his wet hat. But perception matters greatly, especially with your history coming to light. You lean against the wall, silent but attentive. This is the precise moment when Canton's fate will be decided. When 20 years of lawman work gets measured against a youthful crime spree in Texas. The governor reviewed your case, Nix says finally. Given your service record and the immediate circumstances of the Dunn's deaths, he's inclined to be lenient. Canton doesn't outwardly react, but you see the sharp tension in his shoulders ease slightly. But Nix holds up a cautionary finger. He cannot have an acknowledged outlaw serving as a territorial lawman. Too much ammunition for his political enemies. I understand, Canton says quietly. I'll resign. Already handled that part. Nix slides a paper across the desk. Effective immediately. You're a civilian again, Frank. Canton stares at his resignation letter for a long moment before tucking it carefully into his coat. And the Texas warrant. It's still in effect, technically, Nix grimaces. But I've had words with the Texas authorities. They're not particularly interested in pursuing a 20-year-old bank robbery case now. Not worth the extradition hassle. As long as he maintains a low profile, they'll let sleeping dogs lie. It's not a full pardon, but it's a form of freedom. Canton can now live as a private citizen without constantly looking over his shoulder. It's certainly more than most outlaws ever get. What will you do now? You ask Canton as you both leave the sheriff's office. He squints up at the rain-heavy sky. Not sure. Been a lawman so long, I don't know if I remember how to be anything else. Back at your cabin, you saddle your horse and strap on your few belongings. The bounty money remains carefully hidden under the floor, your own private act of penance. Blood money, you decide, should stay buried forever. A knock at your door reveals Canton, still damp from the rain. Heard you're riding out, he says simply. You nod. Nothing left for me here. Where are you headed? North, maybe. Hear there's gold in Alaska. Canton's eyes light up with unexpected interest. Alaska, huh? Been thinking about that myself. You'd leave Oklahoma, you ask, surprised. Despite everything, Canton seemed firmly rooted here. He shrugs. What's keeping me? No badge, no authority, and two dead duns whose brothers might still come looking for revenge. He pauses, considering the destination. Alaska, about as far as a man can go without leaving American soil entirely. It's cold, you warn him, and lawless in its own way. Cold I can handle, and lawless. Canton's smile is dry. I've got experience with that from both sides. You hadn't planned on traveling with company, especially not Frank Canton. But there's something undeniably appealing about having a former lawman along for the treacherous journey north, especially one as incredibly handy with a gun as Canton. I'm leaving today, you say firmly. Rain or no rain. Give me an hour to pack, Canton replies. One last piece of business to settle first. As Canton walks away, you wonder what final loose end needs tying up. Then you remember the surviving Dunn brothers, Dahl and George, were last seen riding west. But are they really gone for good? An hour later, you're mounted up and completely ready when Canton rides up on his tall bay gelding. He's traveling remarkably light, one pack horse with supplies, his weapons, and whatever few personal items he values enough to bring along. Business settled, you ask as you turn your horses north. As much as it can be, he answers cryptically. The rain has settled into a steady drizzle as you ride out of Pawnee. A few townsfolk watch you go, but most stay inside out of the weather. No one seems particularly sorry to see either of you leave. Too much death has followed in your wake. 3 days north, camped beside a small creek, Canton finally explains his business back in Pawnee. "Wanna see Dahl and George's trail," he says, feeding sticks into your small fire. "Make sure they really headed west." And did they? Canton nods. Tracked them about 10 miles. They're running, not hunting, heading for California like they always planned. You think they'll let it go, their brothers' deaths. The fire pops and crackles, sending sparks high into the night sky. Canton stares into the flames, considering. Hard to say. Dahl never struck me as the vengeful type, more practical. George, he's the wild card. Young, impressionable, could go either way. So we watch our backs, you conclude simply. We always watch our backs, Canton corrects gently. That's how men like us stay alive. Men like us. The phrase strikes you. When exactly did you become the same kind of man as Frank Canton? Somewhere between your first bounty hunt and now, the line between who you were and who you've become has blurred beyond recognition. As you journey north, the landscape changes dramatically. Oklahoma's relatively flat terrain gives way to the rolling hills of Kansas, then the endless plains of Nebraska. You stick strictly to less traveled routes, avoiding major settlements where Canton might be easily recognized. Not that anyone's actively hunting the former undersheriff, but old habits die hard out here. The weeks spent on the trail give you time to know Canton better. He speaks little of his past as Joe Horner, but occasionally around the campfire at night, he'll share detailed stories of his lawman days. The outlaws he's tracked, the gunfights he survived, the hanging judge's court where he delivered his prisoners. Ever regret switching sides? You ask one night, going from outlaw to lawman. Canton considers the question much longer than you expect. Not regret exactly, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been caught back in Texas, served my time instead of running. You'd probably be dead, you point out bluntly. Texas prisons aren't known for their hospitality. Maybe, he pokes the fire with a stick. Or maybe I'd have served my sentence and still ended up a lawman just without the lies. A lot of lawmen started out breaking the law, you observe. Seems like you need to understand both sides. Canton nods slowly. That's the truth of it. The best lawmen are the ones who can think exactly like outlaws, know where they'll run, how they'll hide. In July, you reach Dakota Territory. The land is vast and incredibly empty, stretching to horizons that seem impossibly distant. The weather turns mercurial, blistering heat one day, violent thunderstorms the next. Still, you push on relentlessly, drawn northward by the persistent rumors of Alaskan gold and the powerful promise of new beginnings. News travels even on this remote frontier. In a small trading post near the Canadian border, you hear that Dynamite Dick Clifton, one of the last members of the Wild Bunch, has been killed by deputy U.S. Marshals. The age of the outlaw gangs is definitively ending, quickly replaced by a new kind of ordered, bureaucratic society. "World's changing," Canton remarks as you ride away from the trading post. "Closing in on us. Time was a man could ride for weeks without seeing another soul. Now there's towns and settlements everywhere you look." He's right. The Wild West isn't so wild anymore. Railroads crisscross the land. Telegraph lines connect distant cities. Law and order advance relentlessly with each passing year, pushing the frontier further and further back until one day there will be no frontier left at all. "That's why Alaska makes sense," you reply. "Last real frontier we've got." Canton nods, his expression distant. "For now, anyway." In late August, you reach the coast. The Pacific stretches before you, vast and forbidding. Ships come and go from the bustling port, many bound for Alaska and the gold fields of the Yukon. "Ever been on a ship before?" you ask Canton as you watch stevedores loading cargo onto a weathered steamer. "Once," he admits ruefully. "Got seasick the whole damn time." You laugh out loud, surprised by this admission of weakness from the stoic lawman. "Maybe we should go by land through Canada." "Too late in the year," Canton shakes his head. "Winter comes early up north, we'd get caught in the passes." So it's settled. You book passage on a steamer bound for Skagway, spending nearly half your remaining funds on tickets and supplies. The gold rush has driven prices sky high, with desperate men paying whatever it takes to chase the intoxicating dream of instant wealth. The night before your ship sails, you and Canton share a bottle in a dockside tavern, filled with prospectors, sailors, and fortune seekers. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and wild, extravagant stories of gold nuggets the size of a man's fist just waiting to be plucked from Alaskan streams. "You really think there's gold up there?" you ask, deeply skeptical of the claims. Canton shrugs. "Maybe, but that's not why we're going, is it?" He's right, of course. You're not truly chasing gold. You're running from ghosts. From the men you've hunted, the blood you've spilled, the person you became while carrying that bounty hunter's license. "What will you do up there?" you ask. "If not prospect?" "Heard they need lawmen," Canton says. "U.S. Marshals are short-handed with all the prospectors flooding in. Might see if my experience counts for anything." "Even with your history, new territories, new rules." He refills his glass. "Besides, Joe Horner died a long time ago. I'm Frank Canton now, have been for 20 years. "You believe that?" you ask. "That a man can just become someone else entirely?" Canton meets your gaze steadily. "I have to believe it. Otherwise, what was it all for?" Morning brings a steel-gray sky and choppy seas. Your ship, the Portland, looks smaller and much more weathered in daylight than it did in the harbor's evening shadows. Still, it's your passage to a new life, whatever that might be. As you wait to board, a commotion erupts further down the dock. Raised voices, then a flash of movement as someone breaks from the crowd, running desperately toward the ships. Behind him, men are in pursuit, one wearing a lawman's badge. "Stop that man," the lawman shouts. "Wanted for murder." The fugitive races past you, pure desperation in his eyes. In his hand, he clutches a ticket for the Portland, your ship. He's trying to escape to Alaska, just like you and Canton, running from his past just like you are. Without conscious thought, your hand drops instantly to your revolver. Old habits die hard. The bounty hunter's raw instinct to capture, to bring in the wanted man. Beside you, Canton has already drawn his weapon, tracking the runner with practiced ease. But something stops you both. A moment of shared recognition, not of the man himself, but of what he represents. A mirror image from another time. The fugitive makes it onto the gangplank and disappears into the depths of the ship. The pursuing lawman arrives seconds later, breathless and furious. "Did you see him?" the badge wearer demands, panting. Dark hair, blue shirt, running like hell. You and Canton exchange a quick glance. 20 years ago, Canton was that running man. And you could have easily been him too, under slightly different circumstances. "Didn't notice," Canton says, holstering his weapon casually. "Too many people on the docks today." The lawman curses his luck, then hurries aboard to search the ship. You and Canton follow more slowly, your passage tickets in hand. "Why'd you let him go?" you ask quietly as you board the ship. Canton doesn't answer immediately. When he finally does, his voice is thoughtful. "Maybe some men deserve a second chance, a fresh start." "Even killers," you press him. "We've all killed," Canton responds simply. "The question is whether we learn from it, whether we become something better." As the Portland pulls away from the dock, you stand at the rail, watching America slowly recede. Behind you lies a continent of memories, blood, and dust. Ahead, the unknown waters leading to Alaska, to new beginnings. Beside you, Frank Canton, once Joe Horner, bank robber and fugitive, then lawman and bounty hunter, now something undefined, stares north with anticipation in his eyes. "No wanted posters in Alaska with our faces on them," he remarks softly. "No Dunn brothers looking for revenge. No old scores to settle. Clean slate," you agree. But as the shoreline disappears into the mist, you wonder if any slate is ever truly clean. If the blood on your hands and the ghosts in your dreams will truly fade with distance and time. Or if, like Canton, you'll spend the rest of your life balancing who you were against who you're desperately trying to become. The sea stretches endlessly before the ship, gray and mysterious as the future itself. Somewhere ahead lies Alaska, the last frontier with all its promises and perils. You've left behind the dust of Oklahoma, the bodies of outlaws, the blood money under cabin floorboards. You've left behind the bounty hunter you were, but have you successfully outrun yourself? Can anyone truly? As the Portland pitches roughly in the growing swells, Canton grips the rail tightly, his face already tinged with green. "Damn sea," he mutters, swallowing hard. "Remind me why we didn't take the land route." You laugh, finding unexpected humor in seeing the legendary lawman laid low by simple ocean waves. "Because we're in a hurry to become new men." "New men," he echoes, managing a grim smile. "Let's hope Alaska is far enough." The ship sails on, carrying you both toward whatever awaits in the frozen north. Behind you, the age of outlaws and bounty hunters fades like the distant shore, a chapter of American history closing forever. But some legends stubbornly persist. Some stories simply refuse to end. And in the years to come, the tale of Frank Canton, the outlaw who became a lawman who became something else entirely, will be whispered in frontier saloons alongside stories of the Dalton Gang, the Wild Bunch, and the deadly Dunn brothers. After all, in the Wild West, a man wasn't defined by who he claimed to be, but by the stories told about him after he was gone. And those stories, like the frontier itself, have a way of growing wildly with each telling. The journey to Alaska tests your endurance in ways Oklahoma's gunfights never could. For 12 unrelenting days, the Portland pitches and rolls through seas that grow increasingly hostile and gray. Canton spends the first 3 days hanging miserably over the rail, emptying his stomach into the Pacific. His legendary physical toughness is absolutely no match for the ocean's relentless motion. "Should have shot me back in Pawnee," he groans during a particularly violent storm. "Would have been kinder." By the 4th day, he surprisingly finds his sea legs. The though he remains pale and noticeably subdued. The ship is packed tightly with prospectors, dreamers, and fugitives, men not unlike yourselves, seeking either fortune or escape, or often both simultaneously. The common areas buzz constantly with wild tales of Alaskan gold. Each story is more extravagant than the last one told. Nuggets big as your fist just lying in the creeks, one red-faced miner insists loudly. Saw it with my own two eyes. You listen carefully, skeptical but curious. These men believe intensely in something, a chance, however small, at total transformation. Gold fever, they call it. The delirious conviction that the next shovel full of dirt will change everything. You believe any of it? You ask Canton as you share a smoke on deck, watching the northern horizon where the Alaskan coast still lies days away. He shrugs. Some of it. Where there's this many men willing to risk absolutely everything, there's usually something worth having. Maybe not what they think, but something real. What are we actually looking for up there? The question has been nagging at you since you decided to join Canton on this journey. Not gold, I'm guessing. Canton stares hard at the endless gray waves. Space, he finally says. Room to breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder, without seeing ghosts everywhere. You understand that profound sentiment better than most. The ghosts of Oklahoma, the men you've hunted, the blood you've spilled in dusty streets and forgotten creek beds, they haven't stayed behind. They've boarded the Portland with you. Invisible passengers watching from the shadows. The ship rounds a headland and suddenly Skagway appears. A ramshackle collection of tents and rough wooden buildings clinging desperately to the shore beneath towering, dark mountains. Behind the settlement, a narrow valley stretches away into fog-shrouded peaks, the infamous Chilkoot Pass, the perilous gateway to the Yukon gold fields. As the Portland eases into the harbor, you're instantly struck by the sheer chaos on shore. Hundreds, maybe thousands of men swarm the beach and the crude docks. Vast piles of supplies and equipment create small mountains amid the human anthill. Dogs bark, men shout, steam whistles shriek. Jesus, Canton mutters beside you. It's worse than Dodge City during cattle season. You disembark into total bedlam. The muddy streets of Skagway teem with prospectors, con men, merchants, and thieves. Prices for everything from beans to blankets have been inflated to absurd levels by intense demand and distance. A sign outside a crude restaurant advertises eggs for $1 each, a week's wages back in the States. First order of business, Canton says, shouldering his pack, is finding some place to sleep that won't get us robbed or murdered. It takes hours of frantic searching, but you eventually secure a corner in a massive tent that serves as a hotel of sorts. 50 canvas cots are crammed together, each renting for the price of a decent room in San Francisco. Privacy is non-existent. Security is a joke. We'll need something better before winter hits, you observe, stashing your few belongings under the sagging cot. Temperatures are already dropping sharply at night. Canton nods, his experienced eyes surveying the tent's other occupants, a volatile mix of exhausted prospectors, bright-eyed newcomers, and hard-faced men whose true purposes in Alaska might not bear close examination. Tomorrow I'll check in with the law here, he says quietly, see what opportunities exist. You sure about that, you ask? Everything in Oklahoma. I'm not looking to pin on another badge yet, he clarifies. Just want to know where things stand, who's truly in charge, what kind of operation they're running. You understand his caution. Alaska in 1897 is the raw edge of American jurisdiction, a place where law exists more as a concept than a reality. Knowing the terrain, legal as well as physical, is absolutely essential for survival. The next morning, you explore Skagway while Canton makes his inquiries. The town is barely controlled chaos, a frontier boom town violently exploding with the sudden influx of gold seekers. Saloons and gambling halls operate day and night without stopping. Merchants hawk outrageously priced supplies to greenhorns who don't know any better. Religious missionaries compete fiercely with prostitutes for attention on the street corners. Quite a place. A voice observes beside you. You turn to find Canton looking visibly troubled. Makes the Oklahoma Territory seem civilized by comparison. What did you find out? He guides you away from the main street, speaking low. Law's a joke here. U.S. Marshal has jurisdiction but zero manpower. Local peacekeepers are all on the take. Real power belongs to a fellow named Jefferson Smith. Calls himself Soapy. Runs everything from gambling to protection rackets. Sounds familiar, you remark. Every frontier has its version. The difference is, Canton shakes his head grimly, back in Oklahoma, there were enough legitimate lawmen to keep things marginally balanced. Here, Smith's got this place locked down tight, even controls the mail and telegraph offices. That evening, you witness Soapy Smith in action. The self-proclaimed King of Skagway holds court in the largest saloon. He's a tall man with a neat goatee and cold, calculating eyes. His gang of loyal supporters, the Soap Gang, keeps order strictly according to their boss's whims. You watch a prospector beaten bloody for questioning the fairness of a card game, then dragged away when he can no longer stand up. No one intervenes. No one even seems surprised by the violence. We should move on immediately, Canton says after witnessing the beating. Dawson City's further into the interior, but it's got actual law. Canadian Mounties don't mess around with this kind of behavior. Crossing the pass this late in the year is risky, you point out. Winter's coming fast. Canton surveys the saloon, his eyes lingering on Soapy Smith. Staying here might be riskier in the long run. The final decision is violently made for you 3 days later. Canton returns to your tent hotel with news that chills you despite the warm September afternoon. Saw George Dunn on Front Street, he says without preamble. He's here. The name hits you like a physical blow. You're certain it was him. Older, bearded now, but it was definitely him. He didn't see me. Your mind races frantically. George Dunn, the youngest of the brothers, is in Skagway. It simply cannot be a coincidence. The Dunns had talked about California, not Alaska. He's hunting us, you conclude flatly. Canton nods grimly. Has to be. Question is he alone or did Dahl come too? You pack quickly, gathering only the absolute essentials. The Chilkoot Pass is already dangerous this late in the season, but staying in Skagway with a vengeful Dunn on your trail is certain death. We leave at dawn, Canton decides. First boat up Lynn Canal to Daya, then straight to the trailhead. That night you sleep fitfully, waking at every external sound, your hand never far from your revolver. The ghosts you fled in Oklahoma have successfully followed you all the way to Alaska, now taking corporeal, deadly form. Dawn brings fog rolling in heavily off the water, shrouding Skagway in ghostly white. Perfect cover for your departure, but also perfect ambush weather. You move cautiously through the sleeping town, alert for any sign of George Dunn. The small steamer to Daya leaves with the morning tide, carrying a dozen passengers, mostly prospectors headed for the pass with dreams of Yukon gold. You and Canton stand at the stern, watching Skagway disappear into the thick fog, wondering if George Dunn is watching the boat from shore, realizing his quarry has slipped away again. Think he recognized you? You ask Canton. Don't know, been a few years, I've changed. Not that much, you observe. The former undersheriff still carries himself with unmistakable authority, still watches everyone and everything with lawman's eyes. The journey to Daya takes barely 2 hours. Unlike Skagway, this settlement is clearly temporary, a launching point for the Chilkoot rather than a destination itself. Tents far outnumber permanent structures. The beach is littered with mountains of supplies as prospectors sort and repack their goods for the grueling climb ahead. Canadian Mounties won't let anyone cross without a year's worth of supplies, Canton explains as you survey the scene. A ton of food and equipment per man. Literally a ton. 2,000 pounds. We traveling that heavy. You can't imagine hauling so much over a mountain pass. Canton shakes his head. We're not prospectors. We're traveling light and fast. Hunting cabin up near Tagish Lake if we can make it before the snow really hits. A Mountie I knew back in Wyoming told me about it. Said the owner died last spring. Place is abandoned. It's a gamble, but a calculated one. Unlike the gold-crazed masses, you're not heading toward the Klondike itself, but to the less traveled regions just over the pass. And you're moving now, ahead of the heavy, unforgiving snows that will close the routes entirely by November. The Chilkoot Trail begins innocuously enough, a muddy path winding through scrubby forest alongside a rushing creek. But within miles, the true nature of the journey becomes brutally clear. The trail steepens dramatically, quickly becoming a brutal ascent up bare rock and scree. Around you, prospectors struggle violently under impossible loads, many making multiple trips just to transport their ton of required supplies. You and Canton push forward, carrying only what you need to survive. Food, ammunition, basic tools. The weather holds for 3 days, allowing steady, painful progress. On the 4th morning, you reach the summit, the literal border between American and Canadian territory, marked by a tattered flag and a small detachment of Mounties checking paperwork and supplies. Purpose in Canada? A red-coated officer asks, studying your minimal packs with suspicion. Hunting and trapping, Canton answers smoothly. Got a cabin near Tagish. The Mountie frowns. Most men are heading to the gold fields. Most men are fools, Canton replies with just enough humor to avoid giving offense. After a brief inspection of your supplies, deemed barely adequate by Mountie standards, you're allowed to pass. The Canadian side of the Chilkoot descends toward a chain of lakes, Lindeman, Bennett, Tagish, that form the headwaters of the mighty Yukon River. The weather turns viciously as you begin the descent. Snow flurries dance around you, driven by an Arctic wind that cuts through clothing like a knife. The temperature plummets rapidly as afternoon fades toward evening. Need shelter, Canton shouts over the rising gale. Storms coming fast. You take refuge in a crude shelter built by previous travelers, little more than a 3-sided lean-to of logs and branches, but enough to block the worst of the wind. As darkness falls, the snow intensifies, blanketing the world in deep white silence. If George Dunn is following, this will slow him down too, you observe, feeding small branches into your meager fire. Canton nods, his face grim in the flickering light. Unless he was already on the trail ahead of us. The possibility hangs heavy between you, like the smoke from your fire. If Dunn somehow anticipated your escape route, he could be waiting ahead, perhaps at the very cabin you're aiming for. We'll take turns watching tonight, you decide, checking your revolver by feel. The familiar weight is strangely reassuring in this alien landscape of snow and darkness. Morning brings clearing skis and a completely transformed world. Everything, trees, rocks, the trail itself, lies buried under 6 inches of fresh, pristine snow, beautiful but incredibly treacherous. The descent becomes a slow, slippery ordeal. Each carefully placed step carries the risk of a twisted ankle or worse. It takes 3 more agonizing days to reach Lake Bennett, where a small settlement has sprung up around a sawmill. Here, prospectors who have successfully conquered the Chilkoot pause to build boats for the final, long leg of their journey to the Klondike. The lakefront buzzes with activity despite the late season. Men are working frantically to finish their vessels before ice closes the water route entirely. You and Canton rest here for a day, gathering last-minute information and supplies. The cabin you're seeking lies 2 days' journey east of the main route, accessible by a trapper's trail that branches off near the northern end of Tagish Lake. Not many heading that way, a grizzled boat builder tells you when asked about the trail. Nothing there but wilderness, no gold. That's what we're counting on, Canton replies smoothly. You leave Bennett the next morning, following the eastern shore of the lake. The established trail is well traveled enough to be clear despite the recent snow. Other travelers, mostly late-season prospectors rushing desperately to beat winter, pass you heading north. None show any particular interest in you and Canton, for which you're deeply grateful. 2 days later, you reach the junction where your path diverges from the main trail. The trapper's route is barely visible, a faint depression through the forest, already filling rapidly with fresh snow from flurries that come and go throughout the day. Not much traffic this way, you observe, studying the unmarked snow. Good, Canton says. Less chance of running into Dunn by accident. You make camp early, gathering extra firewood for what promises to be a bitterly cold night. The temperature has been dropping steadily as October advances. Ice already forms along the lake edges each night, melting reluctantly under the brief daylight. How much further to the cabin? You ask as you share coffee and jerky beside the fire. Day and a half, if the directions are good, Canton replies, studying a crude map drawn for him by the Wyoming Mountie. Should reach Tagish Lake by midday tomorrow, then follow the shore east to a creek. Cabin's upstream about 2 miles. Sleep comes quickly after the long day's trek, but sometime in the darkest hours you suddenly jerk awake, your heart pounding. Something pulled you violently from sleep. A sound, a sense of deep wrongness. Beside you, Canton is already alert, rifle in hand. "What is it?" you whisper urgently. He shakes his head, listening intently. For long minutes, nothing disturbs the night except the soft sigh of wind through the pine branches. Then faintly, the sharp snap of a twig breaking under weight. Something or someone is moving in the forest nearby. Canton touches your arm, points to the right, then to himself, then left. The silent message is clear. Circle in opposite directions. Flank whatever's out there. You nod, drawing your revolver as you slip silently into the darkness beyond the dying fire's glow. The forest is a confusing maze of black tree trunks against slightly less black snow. You move carefully, placing each foot precisely to avoid twigs or frozen leaves that might betray your position. The cold air burns your lungs, but you breathe shallowly, minimizing sound. Another twig snaps, closer now. You freeze, straining your eyes against the darkness. A shadow moves stealthily between the trees, roughly man-shaped, too large for a wolf, too deliberate for a deer. You raise your revolver, tracking the figure's progress. The blast of a rifle shatters the night. The muzzle flash briefly illuminates Canton's grim face and a larger shape that crumples heavily to the ground with a very human cry of pain. You rush forward as Canton approaches the fallen figure, rifle still trained on the man writhing in the blood-stained snow. "Got him in the leg," Canton says tersely. "Check if he's armed." You kneel beside the wounded man, quickly locating and removing a revolver from his holster. Only then, in the faint starlight filtering through the trees, do you recognize the face contorted with pain. "It's not done," you tell Canton. "Never seen him before." The stranger glares up at you, clutching his bleeding thigh. "Bastards shot me," he gasps, struggling for breath. "I ain't done nothing to you." "You were sneaking around our camp in the middle of the night," Canton observes coldly. "Not the behavior of an innocent man." "Was just looking for food," the man insists. "Been lost 3 days, separated from my partners on the trail." His clothes support the story. Tattered, filthy, showing signs of hard travel and exposure. Still, caution keeps your guard up. The Yukon Trail is full of desperate men, and desperation breeds both lies and violence. We'll treat your wound, you decide. Then we'll figure out what to do with you in the morning. By firelight, you and Canton clean and bandage the stranger's leg. The bullet passed through cleanly, damaging muscle but mercifully missing bone and major blood vessels. With proper care, he'll recover, though walking any distance will be painful for weeks. Name's Harris, the man says once the worst of the pain subsides. William Harris, from Seattle originally. What are you doing this far off the main trail? Canton asks, still deeply suspicious. Harris sighs. Like I said, got separated from my partners. Was heading to the Klondike but took a wrong turn somewhere after Bennett. Been wandering 3 days trying to find the trail again. His story is plausible. The route through the lakes is confusing, especially for newcomers and especially under snow. Men have died within yards of the main trail, lost in whiteout conditions or simply taking a wrong turn. We're not heading to the Klondike, you tell him. Can't take you there. Don't care where you're going, Harris replies wearily. Just don't leave me out here to die. The night passes tensely, with you and Canton taking turns watching both the wounded Harris and the surrounding forest. By morning, it's clear the man poses little real threat. His wound, while not immediately life-threatening, has left him feverish and weak. We can't leave him, you tell Canton privately as you break camp. He won't survive on his own. Canton's face is impassive. Taking him with us is a risk, slows us down, uses supplies we can't spare. We shot him, you remind Canton sharply. Accident or not, that makes him our responsibility. Something flickers in Canton's eyes, perhaps respect, perhaps just resignation. Fine, but he rides the pack horse and we keep his gun. And so your party gains a third member as you continue toward Tagish Lake. Harris, secured painfully on the back of your pack horse, drifts in and out of consciousness as fever from his wound takes hold. You make slower progress than planned, forced to stop early to treat Harris and ensure he doesn't fall from the horse. Should reach the cabin tomorrow, Canton says that evening, studying his map by firelight. Assuming it's where it's supposed to be and assuming it's still standing. And assuming George Dunn isn't waiting for us there, you add quietly so Harris can't hear. Canton meets your gaze across the fire. Been thinking about that. If Dunn is truly hunting us, why haven't we seen any sign of him on our trail? He wasn't far behind us in Skagway. It's a good question. If vengeance drove George Dunn all the way to Alaska, he should have been dogging your steps from the beginning. Instead, there's been absolutely no sign of pursuit. Maybe he lost our trail, you suggest, or took a different route over the mountains. Maybe, Canton agrees, but he doesn't sound convinced. Or maybe he's already where we're going, waiting patiently. The possibility adds a chilling urgency to your journey. The next morning, despite Harris's deteriorating condition, you push harder, determined to reach the cabin before nightfall. The terrain grows increasingly difficult. The trapper's trail fades to nothing in places, forcing you to navigate using Canton's crude map and natural landmarks. Midday brings you to the eastern shore of Tagish Lake, its waters slate gray under a low, threatening sky. Wind whips across the open expanse, carrying the unmistakable promise of snow. You follow the shoreline north, searching for the creek that will lead to your destination. There, Canton points around mid-afternoon. A small stream empties into the lake, partially frozen even in the relative warmth of daylight. This should be it. The creek leads away from the lake into dense forest. You follow its winding course upstream, Canton in the lead, you bringing up the rear with Harris on the pack horse between you. The wounded man has stopped complaining, a sure sign of his worsening condition. The cabin appears suddenly around a bend in the creek, a solid structure of squared logs with a stone chimney nestled in a small clearing. Smoke rises visibly from that chimney, thin but unmistakable against the darkening sky. Someone is already there. Canton raises his hand, halting your small party within the tree line, out of sight from the cabin's windows. "Stay here with Harris," he whispers. "I'll scout." He disappears into the underbrush, circling to approach the cabin from another angle. You wait, tense and alert, one hand on your revolver, the other steadying Harris, who sways dangerously on the horse. Back. 10 minutes pass 15. The light fades quickly as evening approaches. Finally, Canton reappears, his expression unreadable. "Well," you ask. "Done?" Canton shakes his head. "Not done. A woman alone, as far as I can tell." A woman, you can't hide your surprise. Female prospectors exist, but they are rare, especially this far from established routes. "Native woman," Canton clarifies. "Probably Tagish or Tlingit. Looks like she's been living in the cabin since the trapper died." You consider this unexpected development. "What do we do?" Canton stares at the cabin, thinking hard. "We approach openly. No sneaking. Show we're not a threat." He glances at Harris, now barely conscious. "And we've got a wounded man who urgently needs shelter. Might help our case." The decision made, you lead the pack horse into the clearing, approaching the cabin with deliberate, unthreatening movements. Canton walks ahead, rifle pointed at the ground, his hands clearly visible. The cabin door opens before you're halfway across the clearing. A woman appears, holding a rifle with the practiced confidence of someone who knows exactly how to use it. She's middle-aged, dressed in a mixture of native and European clothing. Her dark eyes assess your party with cautious intelligence. "Stop there," she calls in accented but clear English. "What do you want?" "Shelter," Canton responds simply. "We have a wounded man and winter's coming fast." She studies you for a long moment, her gaze lingering on Harris, slumped over the horse. Finally, she lowers her rifle slightly. "Come closer slowly." You advance until you stand before the cabin steps. Up close, you can see the woman's face bears the deep, weathered marks of a hard life on the frontier. "I am Casca," she says. "This was my husband's cabin. He died last spring." "The trapper," Canton realizes. "You're his widow," she nods. "You know of him. A Mountie told me about this place, said it might be abandoned." Canton gestures toward Harris. "Our friend needs help immediately. We can pay." Casca's eyes narrow. "I don't need money, but I need many things before winter. Ammunition, coffee, medicine." She looks pointedly at Harris. "Your friend may die without proper care. We'll share what we have," you offer, "and help with hunting, repairs, whatever needed around here." She considers this for a moment, then steps aside from the doorway. "Bring him in, but understand this is my home. You are guests only." As you help Harris from the horse and into the cabin's unexpected warmth, you realize you've found something incredibly rare in this harsh land. Not just shelter, but perhaps an ally, someone with deep knowledge of the country, someone already established, someone who might help you and Canton truly disappear from the ghosts of Oklahoma, including George Dunn, wherever he might be. The cabin's interior is simple but immaculately well kept. A stone fireplace dominates one wall, its crackling flames pushing back the gathering evening chill. Furs and woven mats cover the packed earth floor. Dried herbs and meat hang from the ceiling beams. It smells strongly of wood smoke, pine, and unfamiliar cooking spices. "Put him there," Casca directs, pointing to a pallet near the fire. "I will look at his wound." As you settle Harris onto the pallet, Canton brings in your minimal supplies. Outside, the first flakes of new snow begin to fall, driven by a wind that moans through the surrounding pines like a living thing. You've reached shelter just in time. Winter has arrived in earnest, sealing you into this unexpected sanctuary with a wounded stranger and a widow who regards you with cautious tolerance. And somewhere out there, perhaps George Dunn still searches for the men who killed his brothers. But for now, at least, you're safe. The ghosts can't follow you through the blizzard that's building outside. At least that's what you desperately tell yourself as darkness falls over the Yukon wilderness. Winter descends on the Yukon with brutal, final intensity. For 3 days after your arrival at Casca's cabin, snow falls continuously, piling in drifts taller than a man. The temperature plummets until spit freezes before it hits the ground. The creek beside the cabin completely vanishes beneath ice thick enough to walk on. The world contracts sharply to the cabin's 4 walls, the immediate glow of the fire, and the small, vital routines that fill each day. Harris's condition improves slowly under Casca's expert care. She treats his wound with poultices of crushed herbs and pine resin that smell terrible but successfully draw out the infection. His fever breaks after 5 days and gradually color returns to his face. "Lucky," she pronounces one morning, checking his bandages. "Bullet clean through, no bone damage." Canton spends his days methodically chopping firewood, hunting when the weather permits, and repairing weak spots in the cabin's construction. You help where needed, learning from both Canton and Casca how to survive in this fiercely harsh environment. It's a completely different kind of education than tracking outlaws across Oklahoma territory, but no less essential for survival. Casca proves to be a woman of few words, but immense, deep knowledge. Born to a Tagish mother and Inuit father, she navigates between native traditions and the ways of white settlers with practiced ease. Her late husband, a French-Canadian trapper named Beaumont, taught her English and how to deal with the outside world. In return, she showed him how to survive in a land that ruthlessly kills the unprepared. "My people have lived here since before time began," she tells you one evening as she teaches you to repair snowshoes. "We know the patterns, when to gather, when to hunt, when to be still. White men come rushing, always rushing forward. Many die because they do not listen to the land itself." The cabin settles into a predictable rhythm as November yields to December's depths. Outside, daylight shrinks to a brief, dim glow at midday. Inside, the 4 of you form an unlikely, necessary community. Harris, once recovered enough to move around, proves surprisingly useful. A former carpenter with skills perfectly suited to cabin improvements. "Never thought I'd end up here," he confesses one night as you share coffee by the fire. "Came north for gold like every other fool. Now I'm just grateful to be alive." "What will you do when spring comes?" you ask him. He shrugs. "Don't know. Can't work a gold claim with this leg. Might try to reach Dawson, find carpentry work there. They're building a proper town upriver." Canton rarely speaks of the future. He throws himself into learning everything Casca can teach, tracking in snow, reading weather from cloud patterns, preserving meat to last the winter. When not working, he sits quietly by the fire, carving intricate figures from wood with surprising artistry. Bears, wolves, eagles, the animals of his new world taking shape beneath his knife. "Didn't know you were an artist," you remark, watching him work on a delicate salmon design. "Neither did I," he responds with a slight smile. "Never had time for it before." Christmas comes and goes, marked only by a special meal of moose meat and dried berries that Casca prepares. The new year arrives during a blizzard so fiercely cold that stepping outside means certain death. You celebrate by simply staying alive, gathered around the fire, listening to the wind howl like hungry wolves beyond the walls. January brings the deep cold, temperatures that freeze unprotected flesh in minutes. The simple act of gathering firewood becomes a dangerous, carefully prepared expedition. Inside the cabin, frost forms in the corners despite the constant fire. At night, everyone sleeps close to the hearth, wrapped tightly in layers of furs and blankets. It's during one such night in late January that the quiet is suddenly broken by an unexpected sound. the distant, faint howl of sled dogs. You wake instantly, your hand reaching for the revolver you keep close by. Across the cabin, Canton is already up, rifle in hand, peering through the single window's frost-rimed glass. "Someone's coming," he says unnecessarily. "Dog team, single sled from what I can make out." Casca joins him at the window. "Might be mail carrier. They come through sometimes, even in winter." "Or might be someone else," Canton says, his meaning chillingly clear. George Dunn remains an unspoken concern, a dark shadow at the edges of your new life. The sled appears at the edge of the clearing just as gray dawn breaks. A single figure drives a team of 6 dogs, moving with the practiced skill of someone who truly knows the country. Not a desperate man on a vengeance mission, but a professional traveler. "Mail carrier," Casca confirms, relaxing slightly. "I know this man, Jacob Whitney, half Tlingit, half American, carries messages between settlements." Even so, you and Canton remain cautious as the sled approaches. Old habits die hard. Whitney brings his team to a halt outside the cabin, speaking soft commands in a mixture of English and native words. The dogs settle immediately into the snow, trained to rest whenever the opportunity presents itself. Whitney himself is a compact man, heavily bundled in furs, his face weathered by years of exposure to the elements. Only when he pushes back his hood can you see he's younger than his bearing suggests, perhaps 30, with intelligent eyes that miss nothing. "Casca," he greets, stomping snow from his boots before entering. "Didn't expect to find you with company." "These men arrived before the deep snow," she explains simply. "One was wounded. They stay for winter." Whitney nods, accepting this with the frontier's pragmatic attitude toward unusual situations. He carries a small pouch of mail, mostly official communications between settlements, but occasionally personal letters that find their way along the wilderness routes through sheer determination. "Nothing for you," he tells Casca, "but I bring news, and coffee if you have some to spare." Over steaming cups, Whitney shares what information he carries from the outside world. The gold rush continues despite winter's grip, with thousands still pouring into Dawson City and the Klondike. Skagway remains under Soapy Smith's brutal control, though rumors suggest federal authorities may finally intervene. "And there's been trouble on the pass," Whitney adds casually. 3 men found frozen 2 weeks back, got caught in a storm, seems like. "Anyone know who they were?" Canton asks, his voice carefully neutral. Whitney shrugs. "One had papers, George something, Dunn, I think. Other 2 were strangers to these parts." The name falls like a stone into still water. George Dunn, dead on the Chilkoot. The last of the brothers who'd sworn vengeance against Frank Canton. "Dunn," Canton repeats softly, testing the word. "You're certain?" "That's what the Mountie said." Whitney studies Canton with sudden, focused interest. "You knew him, crossed paths." "Crossed paths," Canton says vaguely. "Back in the States." The conversation moves on, but later, when Whitney has departed to continue his rounds, you and Canton sit by the fire processing this unexpected news. "So that's it," you say finally. "George Dunn never made it over the pass." Canton stares into the flames. "He wasn't hunting us at all, just another gold seeker who took the same route north." Coincidence, you wonder aloud. Seems hard to believe after everything. Or maybe, Canton's expression is unreadable, or maybe he was following us and the mountain took care of him before he found us. Either way, the intense threat that's hung over you since Skagway is gone. The last Dunn brother lies buried in a frozen grave on the Chilkoot Pass. Another victim of the merciless northern wilderness. The vendetta that began in the dust of Oklahoma territory has finally ended in the snow of Alaska. Does it change anything? You ask about your plans. Canton considers this carefully. "Don't know that I had plans beyond survival, getting through winter. After that," he shrugs. "The world's different up here. Simpler in some ways, harder in others, but no one looking to hang Joe Horner. You observe a ghost of a smile touches his lips. There's that at least. February brings deeper cold but more frequent clear days. The northern lights dance across the night sky in ribbons of green and purple, so vivid they seem close enough to touch. During daylight, which grows longer with each passing week, you venture further from the cabin, learning the surrounding territory, setting traps for small game, becoming part of this land in ways you never connected with Oklahoma. Harris proves more resilient than expected. By March, he's walking with only a slight limp. Eager to make himself useful, he repairs the cabin's roof, builds proper shelves and a sturdy table, and constructs snowshoes that even Casca admits are well made. Man could make a good living in Dawson, she observes, watching him work. They need builders there. Canton, too, has found unexpected purpose. His wood carvings grow more elaborate and beautiful. Casca suggests he might trade them to coastal tribes who value such artistry. For the first time since you've known him, he speaks of the future with something approaching genuine enthusiasm. Thinking I might try for a marshal's position in Dawson, come spring, he tells you one day while you're checking traps together. Heard they're looking for experienced men. Back to law work, you ask, surprised. Even after everything that happened, he nods. It's what I know, what I'm good at. And up here, no one cares who I was before. Only matters what I can do now. What about your past catching up again? Canton surveys the vast white landscape stretching to distant mountains. Let it try to find me here. April brings the first real thaw. The creek ice cracks with sounds like gunshots. Snow recedes from south-facing slopes, revealing glimpses of brown earth. Birds return from their winter migrations, filling the air with calls not heard for months. With spring comes difficult decisions about the future. Harris is determined to reach Dawson City when the trails clear. Canton seems likely to follow the same path, drawn by the possibility of pinning on a badge again in a place where Frank Canton's reputation, good or bad, might hold sway. What about you? Canton asks one evening as plans take shape. Got a direction in mind? You've been pondering this question for weeks. The bounty hunter life holds no appeal anymore. Neither does chasing gold like the thousands still streaming north despite disappointing reports from the Klondike. Might stay, you say, surprising yourself with the decision even as you speak it. Help Casca with the trapping. Learn the country better. Canton nods, accepting this without judgment. Good land here, far from crowds, far from troubles. Casca, overhearing, gives you a measuring look. Trapping is hard work, lonely work, not for men who need excitement. Had enough excitement, you tell her, looking for something quieter now. She seems satisfied with this simple answer. Later, she shows you how to repair a damaged trap with materials at hand. Another small piece of knowledge passed from someone who truly understands this unforgiving land. May brings genuine warmth and the final preparations for departure. The trail to Lake Bennett is clear enough for travel, and from there Harris and Canton can catch transport to Dawson City. You help them pack, provision, and plan their route, using knowledge gained over the winter. The night before they leave, you sit late around the fire, sharing the last of a whiskey bottle Harris had somehow kept intact through all his travels. Strange how things work out, Harris muses, staring into his cup. Almost died on that trail. Now I'm heading to Dawson to build houses for rich prospectors. Life takes unexpected turns, Canton agrees quietly, especially up here. What about you? You ask him. Still set on marshal work, he nods. Already exchanged letters with the chief constable in Dawson. They're interested in my experience. A faint smile touches his lips. Didn't mention which side of the law that experience came from. Joe Horner stays buried then, you observe. Joe Horner died in Texas, Canton corrects. Long before Alaska, the man heading to Dawson is just Frank Canton, nobody special. But there's something in his tone that suggests he doesn't quite believe this himself. Canton may have outrun his past, but he carries it within him, shaped by it in ways that can never be fully escaped. Just as you carry the memory of every man you hunted, every bounty collected, every life altered or ended by your actions in Oklahoma, morning comes clear and cool. Harris and Canton make final preparations for the journey to Bennett and beyond. You help load the sled Casca has traded for, harnessing the 2 dogs that will help pull their supplies. Should reach Bennett by nightfall if you push hard, you advise, checking the bindings one last time. We'll make it, Canton assures you. He seems lighter somehow, unburdened by the weight of secrets and vendettas that dogged him in the South. The moment of parting comes without ceremony. Harris shakes your hand firmly, genuine gratitude clear in his eyes. Wouldn't be alive without you, he says simply, despite you shooting me first. You laugh, acknowledging the strange path that brought you all together. Build something that lasts in Dawson. Count on it, he promises. Canton's farewell is more reserved, befitting the complex history between you. You've been enemies, allies, reluctant partners, and finally, something approaching friends. Take care of yourself, he says, offering his hand. This country doesn't forgive mistakes easily. I've got a good teacher, you reply, glancing toward Casca, who watches from the cabin door. Canton nods. Better than most. He hesitates, then adds, if you ever make it to Dawson, I'll find the marshal's office. With final waves, they depart, following the creek down toward Tagish Lake. You watch until they disappear among the trees. 2 more men seeking reinvention in the vastness of the north. Beside you, Casca stands in comfortable silence. Finally, she says, they will be fine, your friend Canton. He understands what matters here. And what's that, you ask? Knowing when to fight and when to bend, she answers, like the willows in a storm. You help her inside to prepare for the day's work. There are traps to check, wood to split, endless tasks that fill frontier life. But now these tasks feel purposeful rather than desperate. Not just survival, but building something that might last. That night, alone, except for Casca's quiet presence across the cabin, you find yourself reflecting deeply on the strange journey that brought you here. From dusty Oklahoma streets to this isolated cabin in the Yukon wilderness. From hunting human beings for money to learning how to live in harmony with one of the world's harshest environments. Frank Canton's path continues elsewhere, shaped by choices both deliberate and accidental. The Dunn brothers lie in graves scattered across 2 territories. Their vendetta ended not by justice, but by cold circumstance. And you, the bounty hunter who walked away, have found an unexpected peace in a place most would consider unbearably challenging. Outside, the northern lights dance across the spring sky, rippling curtains of color that seem to contain all the mysteries of this vast land. Inside, the fire crackles softly, casting warm shadows that invite contemplation. Your bed of furs and blankets beckons, promising rest after a day of honest work. Perhaps reinvention is possible after all, you think, as drowsiness begins to overtake you. Not by outrunning the past or burying it, like Frank Canton tried to do, but by building something new alongside it, accepting what came before while choosing what comes next. As sleep approaches, you recall something Casca said during the depths of winter. The land remembers everything but judges nothing. It simply is. We can learn from this. The fire settles into embers. Outside, an owl calls once, then falls silent. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the quiet cabin, the peaceful night, the turning earth. And as you drift towards sleep, warm and safe in this place, so far from where your story began, you understand that the greatest bounty you ever found wasn't attached to a wanted poster or paid in blood money. It was this, the chance to begin again, the opportunity to choose a different path, the simple, quiet gift of tomorrow unmarked by yesterday's mistakes. Your eyes grow heavy, your thoughts gentler, more distant. The tensions of the day release one by one like stars fatting at dawn, and finally sleep claims you fully, deep and restful in this cabin that has become, against all odds, something like home.